The only thing about next year's is Shannon, you'll appreciate this, and you might want to even take a few minutes at some point to talk about next year's. We're looking for sponsors like we were this year. We're looking for speakers, and so stay in touch with us. You're here, and so as we talk through this morning, consider coming next year, participating next year somehow in some form or fashion. And you already have our website. Obviously, you got here, have opportunities for that. So look forward to next year, same time, generally, same places, kind of. This whole thing, again, for folks that have just come in, is being recorded, and we will post things on the website and see. So I'm reading this on behalf of Stan because his voice is a little bit weak these days. I think he's feeling under the weather, and he asked me specifically if I wouldn't mind reading. It took 11 hours to read it. It take approximately 10 minutes to read. And so jumping in from 30,000 feet, too often we internalize the wisdom of our mentors and profit from it without reflecting enough on the lifetime of diligent inquiry that went into integrating what was shared with us. One of my most valued mentors was the head of planning at Bell South Corporation. It was Robert E. Butler, and he insisted his planners grasp two complementary concepts, synergy and holism. In Bell South planning, their meaning was simple and exact. Synergy meant that the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts, but the whole is also different than just a collection of disparate parts. In how many ways it was better and why was what we had to explain to Bob Butler if we wanted to kindle his smile of reason and avoid the Arctic chilling stare of someone almost frighteningly intelligently. If your plan was wanting incoherence, that stare said he did not suffer fools at all, and certainly not gladly. Holism meant that you don't understand a thing unless you really grasp a larger part of what it is a part. Till the Bell system was dismembered, it was the largest device ever assembled by a human enterprise. From the day we walked in the door, we needed to understand its purpose, give the best service at the lowest price, consistent with a fair return to the investors and fair treatment of the employees. This gave us a solid framework around which everything else could be assembled. It was while writing a report for corporate management that I came across the hydrogen economy concept. Instantly, I knew it was the very stuff of Bob Butler's synergy, and that hydrogen would someday be the cornerstone of a new and different energy wholeness. Eventually, in 1996, I graduated from Bell South's Atlanta campus, retired to Mooresville, where I became involved in environmental compliance and the role transportation plays in it. Around 2002, soon-to-be Mooresville Mayor Bill Thunberg, who's in the photo with Zoom room with Stan today, asked me to head the Transportation Infrastructure and Air Quality Committee at the Mooresville Chamber of Commerce. Together, we decided to create Hydrail as a means of attracting Bush-era federal fuel cell funding to help pay for a 40-kilometer transit line from Charlotte to Mooresville. By the time the offer, excuse me, of the rail corridor was withdrawn by the railroad, we had online colleagues in several countries. Rather than abandon Hydrail in 2005 with our Appalachian State University colleague Jason Hoyle, we decided to take the idea global. The international Hydrail conferences were convened to make fuel cell trains a physical reality on the ground. This may have been the first use of what's now called social capital to redirect a major industry, but that's another story. Suffice to say, from 30,000 feet up, it was clear that diesel was too dirty to be around much longer. It was also clear that 1880's overhead catenary power has only survived 140 years because every system installed has had to remain in place for 30 years, excuse me, in order to pay for itself. From the investor's point of view, catenary can never go away, whatever benefits might be gained from a succeeding technology. Its baked in 30-year permanence has prevented the industry from even thinking about what might follow. Since we began looking at it, the cost of catenary has gone from less than $2 million per quarter mile to over 10, with no end in sight. Bill and Jason and I knew that within our lifetimes, we couldn't make Hydrail out of money. So we decided to craft it from other people's knowledge and vision and personal concerns for the planet. If diesel wasn't couldn't last and catenary couldn't be paid for, hydro was bound to happen. Batteries wouldn't work and there was nothing else in the wings. So all we needed to try and control was how soon. So we launched these conferences in 2013. The growing pressure of awareness sparked a fusion reaction among Alstom and Hydrogenics and Ballard Fuel Systems and China Railway Rolling Stock Corporation and Cummins Corporation into the next generation of rail traction. Once the cars come first fairy tale had been run over by a Hydrail train, trucks and ships quickly followed. Planes are next. This summer, Scotland hosts the first international hydrogen aviation conference in Glasgow. I've seen the advertisements. That is exciting. That, even more than hydro, is a result that Bill and Jason and I rejoice in most. Expansion of our social capital approach to synthesizing a physical, technical reality on the ground and now in the air from just will and knowledge. But Bob Butler is scowling. Get on with it. Okay, it's time to zoom up to 30,000 feet where looking down, we see the whole energy network. From up here, the smart grid and the hydrogen economy are revealed as parts of two larger wholes, synthesis and extraction. That hydrogen happens to overlie them both has led journalists and corporate copywriters down an unfortunate road to the fertilizer fallacy. In the 97% from natural gas legend, hydrogen is portrayed as a chain binding the sustainable good from one system to the climate-harming extraction waste problems of another. But that's mistaking a jumper cable for a chain. The fact that fuel cell electric mobility borrows a little mined hydrogen to get started is of no significance over time, but the fact that fertilizer will someday be made out of wind and sun is profound. Over the long sweep of time, a 30,000-foot view of the Industrial Revolution reveals a trend. In the early times, matter is extracted from the earth to make energy, leaving accumulated waste. But the future trend is for energy to synthesize matter from the atmosphere and from electrolyzed water, producing no waste. Today, power-to-gas technology is already producing carbon-neutral methane using CO2 removed from the atmosphere. Tomorrow, other hydrocarbons, such as lubricating oils, can be made the same way. From history's 30,000 feet perspective, you can see that taking matter of the earth is, in general, destined to decline, just as discarding unwanted matter into rivers, oceans, and the atmosphere is considered neither morally nor economically acceptable. Extractable sources are inherently finite, as is civilization's ability to cope with CO2, slag, coal ash, and toxic metal exposure. The reality replacing this is life cycle management, even ever more sophisticated synthesis of what needs to be from what already is, with energy added to or derived from the process as needed. Hydrogen's ability to store, recycle, and deliver energy is defining the tipping point, the boundary between the ages of extraction and synthesis. Edison, Tesla, and Westinghouse taught civilization how to use copper wire to move energy from where it's made to where it's used. And just as copper conducts energy through space, hydrogen conducts energy through time. Solar harvesting technologies, whether direct like photovoltaic or complex like tides and hydroelectric, tend to be intermittent. Industrial creation and sharing of waste heat are also intermittent. This fact is calling into being a time grid woven into the power grid and complementing it. The brilliant and precise but pricey smart grid that programmatically matches electric supply with demand is, to some degree, marginalized by hydrogen's time grid, which makes load timing relatively more casual. The main thing standing between society and civilization evolution from extraction towards synthesis is misinformation. Having the public's beliefs about hydrogen rest in the hands of folks who think that hydrogen technology uses up the world's water is unacceptable. The fact that the Hindenburg was diesel powered and that burning hydrogen is invisible has begun to penetrate that folk hoax at last. But the too near universal mutual plagiarism, the most abundant element of the universe, as if it were relevant, needs to be ridiculed in print until no one risks spouting it. Public awareness of sustainability and renewable energy is well enough understood and accepted that if properly fleshed out, the extraction of synthesis trend and hydrogen's central enabling unique role and welcome it should be incomprehensible by the educated lay public. We can get the word out, at least the better of those writers who still feel compelled to elude the dreaded 97% reform it chestnut may also mention that it's a legacy technology from the extraction age, not really connected to the emerging age of synthesis, any more than a pair of jumper cables is connected to a cross-country road trip. Far more interesting would be the long-term synthesis potential for using renewable energy to make fertilizer with no CO2 release. One thing that should make the nature of the brave new world of synthesis real for the fairly sophisticated layperson is a comparison on its parts with more familiar technologies. For instance, hydrogen tanks are much like batteries, but don't store energy. Transformers, rectifiers, and inverters make electricity suitable for specific end uses or for the next step in a system design. Electrolyzers and fuel cells do much the same. Piped hydrogen can be thought of as a form of electrical transmission in the same vein as alternative and direct current. Hydrogen technology makes electrical systems interoperable with combustion technology, as in Fife, Scotland, where electrolyzed wind turbine energy will be used in residential heating boilers and cooking stoves. Hydrogen chromatology is way overblown. The public is being carefully educated as to the importance of H2 being green, and that's good. But it's in the best interest to deliver change, that the relationship between brown and green be couched more in terms of before and after, or legacy and future, than clean and dirty. The incremental choices to be made matters of engineering economics. Yes, writer who belaboring the ethical spin mask the big picture and slow the transition. If I were prepping Bob Butler to explain this to the board of directors with his holism and synergy worldview, I'd have him say this: history is trending away from extraction because of eventual depletion and introduction of an undesired matter into our world. It's trending towards synthesis, where energy is used continually to rearrange the matter we already have. Electricity has long made it possible to create energy where most convenient, but to use it where it's most needed. The recent acceptance of hydrogen technology has given us a similar ability to separate when we create energy from when we use it. As we make all future resource allocation decisions, we need to prefer investments that fit into the emerging world of synthesis and do not depend on the retreating world of extraction any more than immediate exceptions may mandate. We need to be sure that all our people understand this, especially corporate communications, because customers and regulators need to understand it too. Well written, Stan, and not as well said, Gord, but hey, that's it for now. And with that, what I want to do is pass the baton to our co-hosts, the Penticton Indian Band and Jonathan Baynes. You're on.
Excellent, thanks for that. I'm going to share my screen, which is essentially our website, because the picture that you're seeing in front of you, this is Penticton. This is the city that was going to be hosting the Hydrail conference and will be hosting next year. So hopefully you can all see that image. And I'm going to speak to this image a little bit from the Indigenous perspective. So in the valley on the left side, you've got Scarha Lake, and this lake right in front of you is the Okanagan Lake. Everything you're seeing in front of you is part of the traditional territory of the Okanagan Nation. In particular, the Penticton Indian Band, which is a part of that nation, occupies all the land pretty much from the bottom of the valley where I've got my mouse to across the mountains for 47,000 acres. Now, what's interesting to note is sort of where I'm running my mouse around the bottom side of the reserve is where there was a railway line historically called the Kettle Valley Rail. And right now, as we speak, that railway line and that sort of access has been returned to the nation. One of the issues with that is the pollution damage that has been caused by the diesel rail to the land is significant, and so part of the negotiations with the ministry and with the government are around compensating for the damage that was done to the land. A lot of that land was expropriated from individual landowners who are part of the Indigenous nation. And so there is when we look at projects like Hydrail or any sort of significant infrastructure project, historically, the government will come in and just force its way in to occupy and expropriate lands from nations that had no territory, no treaty. And so what we have and what you're seeing in front of you is a land and a nation that does not have a treaty. And for those from Europe especially, you know, there's not many nations left in Europe. Most have been decimated or merged into something else. So in Canada, we do still have very distinct nations. The nation Penticton Indian Band has existed. We've got evidence of it existing for the last 10,000 years on this land. And so when we say it's unceded, essentially what you're looking at is a country within a country. And that's really important because a lot of the infrastructure projects have been so focused on the technology and the engineering and the sort of financial components of that. And what folk are starting to see more and more is that those projects are dead in the water if they have not engaged, adequately engaged the nations whose land they're going to be running across. So are
you still there, Jonathan? Can't hear you.
is that there was a time when governments and big industry could ignore First Nations. I think those times have come to an end. And unless nations are engaged right up front, a lot of those projects are not going to be moving forward. So these webinars, as with the previous one on hydrogen, are normally picked up by people who are very focused and interested in the technology and have more of an engineering bent. But what I'm wanting to just highlight, just to frame the whole conversation, is that none of this happens outside of a context. The chief would tell me stories from his dad, where his dad, who's still alive, they used to drink out of these lakes. And so they would, you know, just come down and drink water straight out of these lakes. So when we look at pollution and we look at the impact that a sort of a modern economy has created, it has significantly impacted the land. It's impacted the way that nations would live off the land. So we look in the foreground of this picture and you see a ton of beautiful vineyards, and it is beautiful. This is an incredibly beautiful part of the world to be living in. But even these things, the vineyards, a lot of these vineyards, we have insecticides and pesticides and chemicals that are used to make these things look as nice and green as they are. And that runs down into the water table, which would then pollutes the lake as well. So the protection of wildlife, protection of the water, protection of the air is significant, but hasn't adequately been addressed historically through technology. And I think, you know, I would always have concerns, as a nation would, with, I would say, Western humanity's belief system that technology will solve all of our problems. I think that paradigm, as Stan has very well outlined, has come to an end. So when we look at things like hydrogen rail, what we're looking for is we're looking for a more holistic solution and that full life cycle. We're saying right from the beginning, is it possible for us to create energy without harming the land? And the answer at the moment is yes, it is. I think we're a few steps away from where we need to be. But what we're saying as a nation is we're getting actively involved in the production of renewable hydrogen and the distribution of that hydrogen. So where we see ourselves is we see ourselves in a bit of a transition economy. So we're met with a couple of decisions. Is we could create a brand new infrastructure to produce and distribute hydrogen, which could be utilized by Hydrail. Or we could acknowledge that there is a existing infrastructure, as in pipelines, as in renewable gas pipelines, and we could work with those existing infrastructure that is in place and do less damage to the environment by starting to remediate the entire system, as it were. So we have an intention to produce renewable hydrogen pretty much on reserve, and the province's high pressure gas line runs straight through the reserve as well, underneath the ground. So what our intention is, through conversations and a power purchasing agreement with Fortis BC, is that we will create renewable hydrogen from a combination of biomass, wind, or solar. And instead of creating another whole system for storing hydrogen, we will store that hydrogen in the existing gas line. And our existing gas lines can take up to 15% hydrogen. And we're working with UBC researchers on how best to do that blending into the hydrogen gas line. Once we've got that, then we start having a pipeline that not only has renewable gas, but also then starts to facilitate a greater hydrogen economy. So instead of having to truck big canisters of hydrogen everywhere, we have an existing infrastructure that can do that and speed up a transition towards a more renewable energy source. So as a First Nation employee, which is what I am, I'm the CEO for the companies, everything we do is really looking at the whole system and saying, how do we firstly, how do we participate in the economic engine, and how do we participate in the next clean energy revolution or reformation? And we're doing that by exercising the title and rights and jurisdiction on banned land. We're doing that by exercising preferences when it comes to gaining contracts with big corporations or governments that are operating on traditional territory. And we do that through partnerships with people like UBCO and GORD and a number of others, because we don't have the years of engineering research. We don't have the capacity. So we do that through partnership and partnering with Mark and the Fuel Cell group in Canada. You know, we believe that to build a truly significant sustainable economy, it's only going to happen through partnerships. So we don't want to do that by ourselves. So where we're placed right now with the Hydrogen Rail Conference is because we have political influence. We've met with the Premier a number of times. We met with the Ministry of Transport a number of times. And to actually implement a rail system through the Okanagan or anywhere in Canada or BC is actually really hard to do. We face a real, and just to be brutally honest, a real unwillingness on behalf of government to transition towards a hydrogen rail system. And so what we do is we exert our political influence wherever we have jurisdiction to push towards that sort of a solution. And so we're going to continue to do that. But in the meantime, we're going to be looking to develop a assembly production unit where we can retrofit existing trucks and locomotives and trains to be able to take hydrogen. So we're not waiting for government to eventually agree on the solution. What we are going to be doing is working with existing train providers like Southern Rail and others to support the evolution or transformation towards a hydrogen economy. So those are some of the projects we're working on. You know, I'm very proud and very privileged to be working for this nation and, you know, in such a beautiful part of the world, and, you know, see it as our responsibility to do right by the planet and to right by the people. And yeah, a cool group, just so you aware, is a Syilx word. Syilx is the Okanagan Nation language, and it's from the word Kulin Chutin, which is the word creator. And cool is a shortened version of that, which essentially means to work, to make, to create. So we've rebranded our companies around that concept of let's acknowledge our worldview and the creator in all we do. And let's acknowledge that everything exists within this sort of paradigm of a creator. And so we do that unapologetically as our companies, and we are very proud to be able to take that perspective. And you know, what we would say is it's interesting that the perspective on this whole systems approach has been in place for thousands and thousands of years. And a lot of Western science is only coming to the realization of that. And so I'm very excited to be part of this, what's the word, part of this world and this nation at this time in humanity's history. And I'm hoping that the real shift that we see in the conversation towards renewables and a regenerative economy and regenerative systems really gets a hold. And so being able to work with engineers and politicians and all sorts of different people is going to be critical to actually make these projects work. So I've finished that. Gord, thank you very much. I'll listen in and participate in any chat room conversations. Otherwise, feel free to email us and follow up if you want to have any other phone calls. But we're looking forward to seeing you and hosting you next year in this beautiful space.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jonathan. All right. And this Zoom webinar, I just actually read an email chat between Andreas and one of the guests that's participating on a cell phone. So we indeed, some universities and institutions are blocking Zoom. That's too bad, but it's a fact. So just be cognizant that there are people listening on just cell phones, and you're welcome and thank you for being here. But feel welcome to pass the link, and when you do pass the link, make sure, I think that has phone numbers listed on it, but we try to include as many as we can in the original meeting invite, but it's obviously free. Pass it to folks as you're going. I just was emailing around checking to see everybody's here, and I see we've got a list of 37 participants. And in keeping with Stan's tradition, I want to do a roll call, which might be a little uncomfortable on Zoom, people. You don't have to, turn your video on. Like I said, we've got people on their cell phone listening. Just, if you don't mind unmuting yourself for just a few seconds, just say, hi, I'm blah from so-and-so. And if you don't even want, if you want to pass on that, that's fine too. But could everybody just take a moment to say hi?
Daljit from Ballard.
Victor Cumming, Mayor of Vernon in the Okanagan.
Grace Quan, CEO, Hydrail Motion.
Ramesh, Project Manager at CUTRIC.
All right, I'm Hegazi. I'm a PhD student at UBCO working on the technology.
I'm Carrie Schindler. I'm Director of Transit and Rail Programs for San Bernardino County Transportation Authority.
Momo Tamaoki from Caltrans.
John Copios from Argonne National Laboratory.
Hey, this is Mohammed Fatmi. I'm an assistant professor at civil engineering at UBCO, and me and Gord, we work together on transportation planning and a lot of other transportation research. And it's great to see everyone connected through technology in this challenging time and talking about technology, Hydrail. So thank you very much for organizing this.
Greg Moreland, Oak Ridge National Lab contractor to the Department of Energy Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Office.
Lynn Harris, I'm an embedded engineering consultant to the North Carolina Department of Transportation Rail Division and head of their Clean Technologies program.
Andreas Hoffrichter, Deutsche Bahn.
Holger Busche, I'm working as a scientific advisor in German Parliament.
I'm Abdul Masood. I'm a PhD candidate with Dr. Lovegrove at UBC Okanagan.
I'm Cassidy Murrell. I'm a Bachelor of Applied Science student working under Dr. Lovegrove.
Matthew Findlay, Director of Locomotive Maintenance with Canadian Pacific Railway.
Ted Krause, Argonne National Laboratory, USA.
Stan Thompson in Mooresville, and Bill Thunberg is here with me.
CHFCA engineering student, UBCO.
I think that's most of us. And oh, go ahead.
Rick Green, president of the South Asian Community Rail Society and former mayor of the Township of Langley.
Hey, Rick, I used to work for the Township of Langley. Welcome. Bro.
Did you?
I did. I was your transportation
We got
guy.
lots to talk about.
We do. Yeah, sorry. All right. Anybody else want to jump in and just give a brief hi roll call going around here?
Good morning, everyone. This is Shannon Schimmelman. I work with the Cool Group and I'm a business consultant.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so we're jumping in late, but that's typical for conferences. So we might cheat on the Americans here, but we'll try to squeeze. We've got updates from my PhD student Hegazi on what we're doing at UBC and across Canada for Hydrail research. Grace Quan for hydrogen in motion, hydrogen storage. Mark Kirby, hydrogen, well, I'm not going to steal your thunder, Hydrogen Association Canada, and also Eddie from CUTRIC. Hegazi or Cassidy, I'm not sure which one of you is going to share your screen, but take it away, guys. And remember, keep it short, okay? We're tight on time.
All right. How's the audio? It's all good? Okay. So can you see my screen?
Not yet. You got to press on the screen before it will allow you to select it to share it.
All right. Okay, here.
There you go.
How about that?
Yep.
Okay. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. This short presentation will be a summary of one of the projects we're working on, our main project here, which is Hydrail 1. We work on a couple other projects mainly related to data collection and data processing, but this is our first prototyping initiative. Specifically, we'll be presenting the work done over the past year to prototype a Hydrail retrofit vehicle. Hydrail 1 is the name we settled on as our first version and is completely funded by Transport Canada and in partnership with Hydrogen Motion. Presenting is myself, Mohammed, a PhD student working on the technology, and assisting will be Cassidy Murrell, a Bachelor of Applied Science student in an STS lab work study. A presentation might feel a little fast-paced as we only have 10 minutes, so please note down the slide number if you have any questions. So we started in March with a very old speeder delivered to us by Caribou Rail. The project is a hydrogen fuel cell battery hybrid railway speeder retrofit. The original vehicle is the Fairmont A-4D motor car, which we figured out by sandblasting one of the wheels and finding it etched on there. It was manufactured sometime between the late 60s and early 80s. It is a rear wheel driven and powered by a single approximately 60 horsepower Ford gas engine with manual transmission, weighs around 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds, has a braking mechanism that is foot operated, completely mechanical, similar to a handbrake, which is applied equally to all the wheels using tread brakes. It had a manual transmission gearbox with a single reverse gear and 4 forward gears. And when we received it, it was not in working order, although I'm told our lab technicians managed to get the engine to work. The idea is to convert it into a hydrogen-powered vehicle where we could demonstrate the Hydrail technology and for the vehicle to be used as a test bed for future research. The current powertrain is a series hybrid where we have a hydrogen fuel cell acting as a charger for our lithium iron phosphate battery bank. The batteries are tasked with meeting all the power dynamics, which is meant to improve performance and overall system efficiency. Power flow is unidirectional from the fuel cell to the battery bank and bidirectional between the batteries and the motor, giving us regenerative braking ability. By design, the entire system voltage doesn't exceed 60 volts, making it a low voltage design according to CSA for safety. Low voltage means high current, which is not recommended for production as it is more costly. However, it simplifies our design and avoids us the need for specialized high voltage equipment, training, and safety certifications. So a little bit on what we plan to do with this vehicle. The retrofitted vehicle mass remains unchanged at 1,000 kilograms. We replaced the 60 horsepower engine with a 20 horsepower or 16 kilowatt electric motor. The energy storage consists of 12 battery cells, each at 1 kilowatt hours, plus 2 ultra high purity, high pressure steel hydrogen tanks at 183 bar pressure, each carrying approximately 7 kilograms of hydrogen for a total onboard hydrogen of 14 kilograms. At rated power, we should get 15 minutes of operation. However, we expect power demand on tangent level track and at speeds below 10 miles an hour to be quarter that of rated power, for example, 3 to 4 kilowatts. This gives us approximately 7 hours of continuous operation. And if we assume a 40% fuel system efficiency, the stored hydrogen should require refilling once every 100 hours of operation. The drivetrain was designed to focus on torque production as opposed to high speed. The vehicle should produce 1,000 newtons of starting tractive effort, meaning that for every kilogram of mass, the vehicle produces 1 newton of starting tractive effort. For comparison, a GP9 locomotive produces approximately 2.5 newtons per kilogram, and that is a locomotive meant to pull many heavy freight rail cars behind it. Continuous tractive effort is achieved through a combination of a unique electric motor technology and speed reduction of a 15-to-1 ratio. So we are speed reduction or torque multiplication. We're really multiplying the torque. Theoretically, the vehicle should be able to pull 2.5 times its mass without exceeding the rated torque for the motor. And even in the most extreme cases, the batteries don't exceed their 1C discharge rate and should normally be at less than 0.3 C most of the time. So what have we done so far? Well, in March 2019, Caribou Rail delivered the speeder. Removal of the existing powertrain and other systems such as the heater, handbrake, wheels, and fuel tank was completed in May. By August 2019, we had disassembled the chassis. Parallel with the disassembly effort, we were constantly taking measurements and updating our CAD drawing of the chassis. In September, we had a good estimate for the final vehicle mass, which we used to size the drivetrain components to ensure adequate torque production. We also spec'd the drivetrain parts, such as the motor and speed reducer. By October, our traction motor had been delivered and our pneumatic tread brake system was designed and ready for building. We ended up ditching tread brakes for disc brakes, and our motor/speed reducer combination block was fabricated. The battery cells, as well as the battery management system, were delivered in January 2020 and were subsequently tested. By February, we had received our Ballard fuel cell, which we have so far not tested, mainly due to regulations on in-lab hydrogen storage and then the pandemic. As of May 2020, the drivetrain and chassis are at 100%, having been assembled, tested, sandblasted, and painted. So here's a slide showing the main mechanical alterations. This is the vehicle as we have received it. This is the vehicle after we removed the engine and the transmission block. We did some more removing, the entire vehicle body, the fuel tank, batteries, the heater, everything. And now we have the chassis. We ended up removing some more just to clean it up and draw the parts. And then we assembled the drivetrain to the rear axle. And then at last we have the vehicle sandblasted with the drivetrain assembled and the entire chassis painted. Here is a short video of progress as of June 2020. So this is a week ago. And with that, I'll hand over to Cassidy for the rest of the presentation.
Cassidy, are you on mute?
Yeah, I'm here. There we go. All right, key design factors. When deciding upon the layout for Hydrail 1, the following objectives were kept in mind: safety, ease of use and maintenance, and simplicity of our design. Safety is obviously a priority, and therefore all design choices were made so that safety was not compromised in any way. Next. The greatest danger in a vehicle that runs on hydrogen gas is obviously that the gas may combust, and so our vehicle will have exceptional ventilation to prevent the buildup of hydrogen gas in case of leaks. This is why the gas lines, hydrogen cylinders, and fuel cell exhaust are all sealed off from the interior of the vehicle inside the gearbox cover, which is a T-shaped compartment that can't be seen in this picture, but will be seen in later pictures. The large opening in the vehicle floor allows for airflow. Realistically, this will probably be covered by a grate vent to prevent large debris and animals from getting inside the vehicle. Next. The hydrogen fuel cell is the heart of Hydrail 1, providing, in addition to the battery banks, the power for operation of the entire vehicle. The fuel cell is air-cooled and therefore requires an air intake, and also produces exhaust that needs to be vented to the vehicle's exterior. For this reason, we have placed the fuel cell at the very front of the vehicle, where the internal combustion engine of a car, for example, would normally be placed. The grill and air filter will, in front of the fuel cell's air intake, will catch any debris, and the rear of the fuel cell is open to the exterior of the fuel cell via the opening in the vehicle's floor. One possible improvement over the current setup would be to add a system that would catch the pure water exhaust while still allowing the air to be vented to the vehicle's exterior. Next. The hydrogen cylinders were placed at the rear of Hydrail 1, mostly for utility. They are easily accessible through large hatches, seen here, which allows the driver to easily assess the hydrogen levels and replace the tanks when necessary. This previous setup that we had the cylinders on their sides, but due to a various number of factors, we decided to place them upright, even though it's a little more unconventional. The hydrogen cylinders will be placed there and connected to the fuel cell and regulator via hoses that will run from the rear of the vehicle through the center of the gearbox cover to the front. Next. The batteries that help to power Hydrail 1 are all housed in 2 bays located beneath the vehicle floor and accessible through hatches, one on each side. The benefit of locating them here is that it takes advantage of unutilized space and lowers the vehicle's center of gravity. Power cables from the batteries will run under the floor and up into the center of the gearbox cover to the fuel cell and dashboard. The data cables running from the fuel cell to the valve block will run through the gearbox cover, and the gas connections from the valve block will run up to the hydrogen cylinders. Next. Lastly, safety. It's also the most important thing I have modeled here. These features are merely representative of what will be in place in our Hydrail 1. It is not necessarily going to be installed in this manner. In addition to being able to manually shut the valves in the hydrogen cylinders, there will also be an emergency shutoff button for all systems, represented by this large red button you can see in the middle of the dashboard. There is also going to be a brake lever in addition to the throttle for sudden stopping. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys. That's great. Can we leave questions to the end of the session, or does anybody have a burning question right now? All right, hearing none, I gave you a split second there. Grace, Quan, you're on. Grace, are you there? Unmute yourself if you are.
Hi, Gord. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting program. I'm just going to share screen now and go through our presentation. Okay, so hydrogen emulsion. Hegazi and showed a very interesting presentation about what you're doing using standard solid state tanks. What we would like to use is our innovative solid state hydrogen storage. So just to give a summary of what's happening in the hydrogen landscape, one executive summary about our technology is really what we've developed is a safe, cost-efficient, and a multi-purpose that we can put in a tank storing hydrogen under very high density. It's equivalent to a high-pressure tank at 700 bar, but with a volumetric and cost advantages. So our tanks can be used in three major ways: to transport and distribute hydrogen, to improve hydrogen fuel cell refueling, to store energy from wind and solar, and of course, every fuel cell application requires a tank. So what we believe is our breakthrough technology is a key to unlocking the hydrogen supply chain, and will play a major role in growing the global market, such as this Hydrail application for hydrogen technology. The exhibit one is talking about indicators of hydrogen's momentum, and this is from the Hydrogen Council in 2020. So there's the first column is there's like a strong push to limit carbon emissions from COP various meetings. There's a falling cost of renewables and hydrogen technologies, a strategic push in national roadmaps. So you can see that in China, you can see that in Europe. And then of course the industry alliances momentum is growing. And that's both within hydrogen organization, alliances with fossil fuel, all sorts of different and unique alliances with the Cool Nation, things like that. So our next slide, just bear with me for a minute. This takes a minute to move pages. Sorry, it doesn't seem to be wishing to. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. Okay. This is technology at its best. You cannot have a meeting and not have a technical glitch.
Gotta have a glitch.
It has to have a glitch. So here we go again. So once we start sharing screen, my computer decides it doesn't want to work. So here it is. So why do you need a solid state hydrogen storage? One of the big impediments to large scale adoption is cost, and a big part of that cost is in storage and transport. So hydrogen stations, as you know, they're a very limited number of stations, although Kelowna is scheduled to get one next year. They're very expensive. They cost about $2 to $3 million each pump, and they have very high operating costs because of the compressors and chillers to get to 700 bar. So the second issue is hydrogen storage and transport. So they're very high cost as well, 30 times the cost of a conventional gas tank. So if you can imagine a gas tank in your vehicle, they're $200 to build. Right now, a high pressure hydrogen tank is somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000, if not more, to build. The high pressure requirements also creates a safety factor, and it puts in play economic feasibility. Okay, so how does hydrogen motion resolve this issue? What we've done is we've made a nanomaterial. The hydrogen is attracted to the surface of the nanomaterial using van der Waals force. We keep it at 50 bar. We have we can make it, because it's such low pressure, we can make it in multiple sizes, from drones to swappable tanks for vehicles to tanker size to store excess energy. So why retrofit diesel electric locomotives? Gord, you didn't go into your presentation about what the advantages are, so I thought I would just touch on it briefly. You know, there's 25,000 diesel electric locomotives from North America, and I'm unashamedly cribbing off Gord's notes, so I have to recognize that. The useful life is 50 years or more, and a locomotive costs $2 million. So this market value for just the diesel electric locomotives alone is worth $50 billion. To refit a hydroelectric, we're looking at the economic drivers. In Canada alone, your GHG savings is 6.4 megatons of CO2. That represents a carbon tax saving $192 million at $30 a ton. And then there's also a reduction of non-attainment penalties. I know Laszlo's on the line, so he would understand this. Then we go to, I just put up Mark very kindly put together a sort of a picture of what something like this would look like in full scale. So you have, of course, the power modules of the fuel cell. You have hydrogen storage. We can make them in these tubular cylinder racks. Right now, this project is with BC Arc, UBC, Hydrogen Motion, and SRY Rail Link. We can put in more fuel, so operational time and duration is the issue. That's the advantage Hydrogen Motion brings to the table, as well as lower operating costs, less energy to require to refuel, store, and transfer. So that's what our advantage we bring to the table, as well as why we're working in Hydrail, because I think there's a real economic opportunity as well as a environmental opportunity. Last slide is just my contact details. If anyone wants to get a hold of me, ask questions if we run out of time on this interesting presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grace. And I did send a chat note to everybody. Send a private chat to Grace if you've got questions, because we're short on time, so I apologize. Or if there's time at the end of the webinar, we can have a broader discussion, but definitely there's breakout rooms as well as chats to stay in touch with folks. All right, Mark Kirby, you're up, sir. Go for it. And if you can give a little bit of a self-introduction, I should say that to everybody because I just want to cut to the chase here, so I apologize.
All right. Thank you very much, Gord. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here this morning. And hello, everybody. My name is Mark Kirby. I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. And hopefully you can see my screen at this point. Could somebody just let me know? Yes. Okay, good. So what I want to talk a little bit about today was the Fuel Cell Association itself and some of the things we're working on to advance hydrogen, more broadly. Because I am certainly not an expert in fuel cells and locomotives, but we do see a lot of activity happening in the hydrogen space, and we think that certainly the use of hydrogen fuel cells in transit agencies for commuter trains, commuter rails is an application that can start moving forward fairly quickly. My background, I joined the CHFCA in August. Prior to that, I was more than 30 years in various large and small companies, really doing technology commercialization for most of my career. So I'm familiar with not only the development side of it, but the difficulties and challenges of actually getting technology out into the field. And that's what I've been interested in, and what I see is where we are in the hydrogen fuel cell space is we need to start moving to getting this technology out into the market. The CHFCA is a nonprofit association representing the fuel cell companies in Canada. We call ourselves the voice of the sector, and we do typical association things, government relations, advocacy, projects, communications, et cetera, et cetera. I encourage you to go look at our website, www.chfca.ca, for further information there. What our member companies do is we cover the full range of fuel cell and hydrogen supply and technology. We have OEMs, we have hydrogen suppliers, we have suppliers of fuel cells and fuel cell parts, we have hydrogen equipment producers, we supply stations, we have companies involved in leading edge technology, such as hydrogen in motion, We do testing, certification, engineering studies, and of course, research and development at universities and institutions right across the country. So we cover the full range from A to B and have a long history of doing this in Canada. When I talk to people, I try to emphasize, I always want to talk about 3 main bullets to keep things simple. Do a lot of talking with government and industry, and there's 3 things that really want to try and emphasize when we talk to them. This is, basically answering the questions is, why should they care about hydrogen? Why should they care about fuel cells? And the number one thing, and probably the most important thing to emphasize to industry and to government is, it's essential. And a lot of people don't recognize that, but it is absolutely key if we're going to hit our net zero 2050 goals. And that's to, as probably most people in the line are aware, to decarbonize tricky areas like industrial processing, gaseous heating, to help with the rollout of clean power production by providing load management, storage, backup, and transmission of energy. And of course, in the transportation field, with hydrogen ICE and fuel cell electric vehicles, to decarbonize particularly some of the heavier transportation sectors that are hard to decarbonize and just aren't suitable for batteries. So that's the number one thing, and we really need governments and industry to recognize this is essential. We are going to need huge volumes of low cost, low carbon intensity hydrogen to achieve these goals. We need to start thinking about that now. The other thing, and this is with apologies to the many foreign and US visitors we have, but it really is also something that benefits Canada. We have a long history of working in hydrogen and in fuel cells. We have leading companies in the sectors. We stand to be able to produce hydrogen very cost effectively. And so this is a huge business opportunity for Canada and for Canadian companies. And we like to emphasize this. This is a snapshot of some of the companies we have in our association. And they're seeing investment, they're seeing business booming, and we want to anchor them in Canada. We want to see them grow here. So that's a big opportunity for us. And the third thing that we emphasize is it's inclusive. And that's another important feature. Hydrogen is not a win-lose like a lot of technologies. You can make hydrogen from just about any energy source. So it certainly supports renewable power, but it also supports and is a path forward for the oil and gas industry, because they can also produce low carbon intensity power using carbon management technologies, capture, sequestration, or production of chemicals from the carbon, or production of food from the carbon, or other ways of managing that carbon, anything other than releasing that CO2 into the air. And so there are many ways that you can make hydrogen. Can also be made from off-peak nuclear in a low-cost way. So it's a very inclusive technology from that point of view. It's also inclusive from the point of view of the users of it, because it gives them choice. It gives them something that they can drive farther and fill faster to allow them to keep the efficiencies of their operations up, and it provides them choice in their heating technologies, etc. So I won't spend a lot of time on it, but that's another area where we feel hydrogen offers a lot of benefits to the economy. So again, it's essential, it's Canadian, and it's inclusive. So what's happening? Well, there are things certainly happening. As was mentioned earlier, Canadian companies are involved in hydrogen fuel cell projects around the world. Studies are ongoing, but it is certainly taking its time, and we certainly want to find ways to move that forward. We have many companies involved in development of hydrogen fuel cell equipment. And we just announced here in Canada, Daimler and Volvo and Rolls-Royce are expanding the work they're doing here in Canada on fuel cell technology to move that into the heavy-duty space. We have, of course, the transit buses that are the most advanced to the fuel cell applications and that are ready for commercialization today. Many OEMs offer fully backed and warranted fuel cell electric buses, and these are ready for deployment today, and we need to be starting to look at them because they offer a very good solution for transit agencies. So what are we seeing as a result of all this in Canada? Well, we have this technology leadership that's leading to investment, and we are seeing investment flowing into our Canadian companies now. We're seeing jobs and growth. But we always run into the question of, you know, well, haven't we seen this before? There was a boom back in the early 2000s. What's different now? And it is different this time. The improved cost and performance of the fuel cells and fuel cell products, the improved costs and a broad availability of low carbon intensity hydrogen, and the cost for producing that is dropping. And also policies are being put in place globally that are pushing us to a carbon constrained economy that provide the business case that the hydrogen fuel cells need. We're also seeing in Canada that we have an advantage in terms of our ability to produce low cost, low carbon intensity hydrogen. And this is a chart developed by the Cesar Center at University of Calgary, and it just looks at comparing the cost to produce hydrogen from various sources around the world. And I know it's very hard to read, but the Canadian flag there points at using Canadian natural gas, including carbon capture and sequestration. And we're down at sort of the $10 per gigajoule. And using coal and carbon sequestration or Canada's hydro power, we're sort of in this $20 per gigajoule. This red line here shows the, you know, what is equivalent to $2 a kilogram hydrogen. And that's kind of that's the level you really need to be at to start looking at blending hydrogen into natural gas streams and using it in industrial processes. So you see, we can achieve that with Canadian power grid. If you look at off-peak power from renewable projects, that cost will be even lower. It can actually be negative if you're using it for grid management or curtailment. So it's this is our base load power, but there's a real opportunity also to look at off-peak nuclear and off-peak renewable powers to help drive that cost down as well. When you look at for replacing diesel in heavy duty, it's usually because the efficiency is around $5 a kilogram is where you want to be. But that means that you need to also include the transportation, the compression, and the storage, which is where things like what Grace is working on becomes very important, because you got to be able to take it from its source point to the use point and keep those costs below there. And then in many cases, if you're competing against batteries strictly, you can actually support much higher costs. You can support the costs that would be, let's say, liquid hydrogen supply. But in that case, because you're looking at efficiency and the efficiencies that fuel cells give you over batteries. And so in those sort of situations, you can support higher costs for your hydrogen. We're also seeing government support, federal, British Columbia, Quebec, and Alberta level. So that's, I won't go into too much detail, but there is growing, as was mentioned earlier, there's the roadmaps being put in place, there's plans being developed, and there's strengthening interest in what hydrogen can do. So what do we need? Well, we got a bit of a challenge here, and this is where we look to this group and others to start helping solve these problems. You got a chicken and egg. If you're going to ask a railway or a transit agency or a trucking company or whoever it is to commit to hydrogen energy, well, they're going to look at you and they're say, first of all, they need to understand it. They need to know what's going on and how it can help them. They need to be able to see commercial fuel cell EV products. They need to be able to see something that they can buy backed by a warranty at a reasonable price and so on. And they need cost-effective hydrogen supply. And they need to believe that that hydrogen is going to be available and is going to be low carbon intensity. And on the other hand, you've got the people that can supply that, the OEMs and the hydrogen suppliers. Well, they need to see demand. And so you got this chicken and egg problem where you got, until you get the demand, you can't get the products. Until you get the products, you can't get demand. It is moving forward, obviously. But the concern we got here is, how do we move this faster? We got concerns around loss of Canadian leadership. We got concerns around laying groundwork for our post-2030 GHG targets. So we need to try and find ways to move this a little faster. And what we say and what we're proposing, those fall into what we need to stimulate this. And number one, visible commitment from governments and others that hydrogen is necessary. We need to see the policies coming into play, the clean fuel standards, zero emission vehicle mandates, et cetera, that support those and provide a business case for those technologies. We need to see work, and we call it a sector transformation task force. That's working with the various industrial sectors, whether that's municipal transit, trucking companies, whatever, to address the barriers, to educate, to look at codes and standards to help in making information available to those groups. We need to start putting a plan in place together for hydrogen infrastructure. If we're going to need petajoules of hydrogen, well, how is it going to be produced and distributed? We need to start thinking about those plans today and start putting in the groundwork for the big baseload production, the distribution, and the intermittent production, et cetera, for that hydrogen. We'll need subsidies for early adopters, and those should be technology neutral. I mean, it should be looking at zero emission, whether that's battery or fuel cell, but there will need to be some subsidies in place to stimulate that demand in early adopters. Of course, we need ongoing support for research and demonstration. There is lots of areas that need further development, but I do want to emphasize that we can start commercializing now. And what we're looking at now is stimulus projects. How do we get stimulus projects underway? When I talk about sector transformation, what we're talking about is high priority sectors, and these are some of the ones that are high priority that the technology is ready. We can start looking at them and start deploying products today. And I've emphasized municipal transit. That's the EV transit, buses and trains is an area where the conditions are right to start doing deployments today. There are trains available that you can get for municipal transit, and there are buses available for that. So that's an area we think is a high priority. And as such, what we're putting together is a committee in the CHFCA to look at that. We want to work with those transit agencies and municipalities. We want to support the sector transformation. We want to make that as a flagship for hydrogen energy deployment in Canada. And we're working in partnership with the Canadian government on this to help drive this forward. And I encourage, we'll be sending more information on this, but I encourage people to participate in this. We think it's going to be a good business opportunity and help drive things forward.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry for talking so fast. I do apologize. A lot of cover, and I wanted to try and get through this. But if you have any questions, please do give me a call. And I also apologize, Jonathan. I did want to acknowledge that I'm in North Vancouver here. I'm on the traditional lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam bands, and we do appreciate the work you're doing and recognize that the First Nations have a huge role to play in this whole activity. I'd also like to acknowledge the paper you read from Stan, and that was a really insightful and inspiring summary of the situation. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark. And I am excited that the PIB and Jonathan are stepping up as the trusted voice. That's where we need to go. I'm just so excited about that. So thank you for underlining that. And actually, this is a perfect segue to Ramesh with the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, who have just yesterday released a very important report. So Adi, if you're ready, go for it. Don't forget to share your screen and unmute yourself.
I think I've got it all sorted, and I hope everyone can see my screen. Thank you so much, Gordon, for the invite to participate today. The Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, for those who don't know, we are a consortium of transportation innovation leaders. We just turned 5, like earlier this year. We had a celebration planned as part of our conference, which is set for later this month, but that conference was turned digital in light of the current situation, and we will have a larger celebration later this year. We have over 100 members with offices all across the nation in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and British Columbia. And our members span the gamut from industry, consultancy organizations, utilities, transit agencies, government, academia, and other not-for-profit organizations. Our focus is mainly on low carbon smart mobility and technology innovation. I would like to mention that it is on low carbon smart mobility. We are a technology agnostic organization. We don't believe it's going to be a one or the other solution between hydrogen and battery. We believe it's going to be a mix of multiple technologies, all towards the goal of achieving zero emission. With that in mind, I would like to talk about some of our projects that we're working on at the moment actively in the hydrogen space. We do have a number of other projects that we're working with some academic partners on research projects, and we're working on the early stage of commercialization of some other projects. But these are the main projects we're working on at the moment, which is our Pan-Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial. We had a rail report that rail innovation report that Gordon just mentioned that we released earlier this week. That was for Transport Canada. And the last project is a fleet electrification feasibility study that we're working for British Columbia that we're looking to progress. That will include transit vehicles, municipal vehicles, and all fleet vehicles all across the province. And on the energy consumption needs, the cost efficiency, and on the GHG reductions that we could achieve with that. So to quickly dive in, the Pan-Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Electric Bus Demonstration Integration Trial, this has been a long time coming. Daljit is on the line and he will know about this a little bit. We've been working on this for a few years now, but we are making a lot of progress this year. We're seeing a lot of progress this year as we see support from the federal government for 5,000 zero emission buses in the next 5 years, which Mark touched on a little bit. And we are seeing a lot of interest from multiple other transit agencies as well in the hydrogen space. So we are looking to push this forward. We will get this done this year, and we're looking to include other transit agencies over the coming years. So just to give you a quick overview of this project, we have one champion transit agency for this project at the moment. That's My Way, based out of Mississauga in Ontario. They're looking to procure 10 fuel cell electric buses and the fueling station with the compression, storage, and dispensing. They're looking to get the buses on the road by 2021, and we're looking at future expansion into commercial trucking as we develop that corridor, and also potentially increasing it to other transit agencies within the GTHA, which might be within shouting distance of that delivery model for hydrogen. So we're the main stakeholders involved in this project are My Way, which is a transit agency. We have Ballard and New Flyer, the suppliers of the fuel cell stack and the transit bus. And we are also looking at Hydrogenics and Enbridge as stakeholders in this project, as they own the Markham power to gas facility. That's within delivery distance of both My Way and other observers that we have on this trial, such as the TTC in Brampton. So once we build out this delivery model, this model could be used to supply hydrogen to TTC. It could be used to supply hydrogen to Brampton Transit, to YRT, and to My Way, thereby achieving those economies of scale that would drive the price of hydrogen down, and achieving that economic feasibility that would drive further adoption of hydrogen technologies for buses. So we're really looking at getting this initial 10 bus deployment out, and we see a lot more buses to follow. One of the reasons we're extremely passionate about this trial is, one, the technology is Canadian, as Mark touched on a little bit. All of the fuel cell stacks, the manufacturer of the bus, Canada is a world leader in the development of fuel cell technologies, but there are no fuel cell electric buses on Canadian roads today. We are supplying these buses, we're supplying the fuel cell stacks to the US, to Europe, and to China as well, but we don't have any of these buses on the road today. And that is a huge factor that we're looking to solve with this initial pilot. And we also see that a number of these technologies, the drivetrain, the fuel cell stack, these are all transferable to Hydrail as well. So we do think that this initial pilot will help the Hydrail deployments as well, as we drive the demand for hydrogen, and also the development of the technologies that will be required for Hydrail. With that, I'd like to move on to our next project, which is the Rail Innovation Consultation and National Strategic Planning Initiative. So this was a 3-year-long initiative. I believe my colleague Elnas, who wrote the final report, is also on the call. So in case anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to her on chat as well, and feel free to reach out to me on chat as well. This was a 3-year-long initiative. We were contracted by Transport Canada to look at the Canadian landscape. The main goal of this requirements that we were contracted by Transport Canada was to look at the state of the Canadian landscape as it is today, and to identify technology theme areas that would drive Transport Canada's rail innovation strategy planning for the medium term and for the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So as part of this initiative, we completed a literature review of rail innovation projects and research topics around the world that informed us as to technology theme areas that were to be considered, after which we completed 5 national consultation sessions with rail industry stakeholders, transit agencies, fleet operators, academics, and consulting agencies across Canada. And we identified short-term, medium-term, long-term rail innovation projects that would put Canada in a leading rail innovation position by 2025, and which align with low-carbon mobility goals in passenger and freight transport. So the process for this was we completed the literature review, and we identified 18 technology theme areas for consultation. We then passed these theme areas along to Transport Canada, who removed 5 theme areas as they were based on a qualitative assessment, as they were out of the potential for the immediate short-term and medium-term deployments of Transport Canada and were outside of their mandate. So we then picked the available 13 technology theme areas, and we conducted 5 consultation sessions. We split the technology theme areas into 4 different groups and split them across 5 consultations, which I'll talk about in a second. We analyzed the outcomes of the consultation sessions using quantitative and qualitative ranking. So the quantitative ranking provided the quantitative ranking ranked the technology theme areas in terms of what was of most interest to our stakeholders, and the qualitative ranking was used to provide draw more information regarding the social, economic, environmental benefits regarding these theme areas for Transport Canada, and it was also used to break the tie in case of a tied ranking from the qualitative ranking itself. And we identified top technology areas for further exploration. So the core theme pillars of the rail innovation research were to scan new technologies. As I mentioned, we split the technology theme areas into different groups. Those were alternative propulsion, energy efficiency, alternative materials, and operational optimization. So we have a lot of information. There is a literature review as well, but I'm not going to delve deep into what we found from the literature review of the state of the industry across the world, as we do have a number of partners from across the globe who could speak to that. And I'm not going to talk about the energy efficiency, alternative materials, or the operational optimization today, as I believe the alternative propulsion topic would be of most interest to the attendees who are on the call today. But the report is available on our website for free. If you're interested, you can download it and read the entire report regarding the other sections as well. So we then went through the process of the qualitative and quantitative ranking, and we identified the top 10 promising rail innovation technologies for Canada. We are then going to move forward with this. The next steps, we believe, are collaborative project development with Transport Canada on these top 10 promising rail innovation technologies. So the top 3 projects that we identified out of the 13 technology theme areas all fell under alternative propulsion. We found that alternative propulsion generally ranked towards the top, and alternative materials and other topic areas generally ranked towards the bottom. So the top three projects that we found were catenary-free electrification rail facilities. This included both stationary and mobile energy storage integration for off-peak energy usage and grid support. The second project was Hydrail passenger. This was the use of hydrogen fuel cells in combination with batteries for passenger rail in particular. We found that splitting between passenger rail and freight, our stakeholders were more inclined to support Hydrail for passenger rail in particular, as the fares would help subsidize some of that initial capex costs that were involved with the incorporation of Hydrail technology. And the third project we found was CNG or hydrogen to diesel complementation. This was the use of either CNG or hydrogen technology in complement with diesel technologies. So the use of diesel for propulsion, but the use of CNG or hydrogen to power ancillary systems on the train, thereby allowing for transit operators and rail operators to dip their toe in the water and understand the hydrogen technology, the supply chain requirements, and the operational requirements for these technologies, while reducing capex costs and building out that supply chain that would reduce the cost of hydrogen supply moving forward. So some of the conclusions that we found from this initiative was that in the short term, there is opportunity to electrify switch engines in train yards. So not the entire for an entire locomotive, not the powertrain itself, but for switch engines within train yards, there's a lot of opportunity to reduce local GHG emissions within the train yards themselves. We also found that there's an opportunity for Canada to leapfrog catenary electrification systems and to move directly into advanced non-catenary electrification systems such as Hydrail and battery energy storage systems. We found that Canadian rail industries have a strong desire to support domestic advanced rail technologies through demonstration, research, and development. We also found that hydrogen fuel cell-based electric rail technologies is one of the most beneficial ways to achieve emission goals and to grow the economy through demonstration, research, and development. And the optimal technology theme areas, we found one of the conclusions was the optimal technology theme areas based on interest was around $10 million to $20 million in total cost, had an average of 5 years to complete, and approximately about six stakeholders, beyond which the project was achieved a level of complexity that made it difficult for stakeholders to really sink their teeth into it. So as I mentioned, this report is available on our website as of earlier this week. It is available free for download. It will be available from Transport Canada's website as well later in the year as they work through some COVID protocols, but it is available on CUTRIC's website at the moment. If you want to download, it's about a 100-page report. I summarized it really quickly as I was only provided about 10 minutes, but there's a lot of detail in there. And the last project I do want to touch about, and I believe Gordon, you were on one of our presentations as well for the rail report. So we do appreciate your engagement with that. The last project I want to touch on is the British Columbia Fleet Electrification Feasibility Analysis and Simulation-Based Planning. So something that we found is that we have an internal developed route high simulation tool that for transit agencies who are in the initial stages of planning their electrification rollout will provide an assessment on their routes, on the capability of their routes to be electrified using today's currently existing technology, be it hydrogen fuel cell, be it battery electric, so that the transit agencies are able to get an understanding of what it would take to electrify their fleets, what sort of investments they would require in terms of the chargers, in terms of the fueling station, and what routes would actually need to be modified before they can be electrified, and it wouldn't be a 1:1 diesel replacement. And we found that those feasibility studies are a huge aha moment for transit agencies, and they don't deter them from electrifying, but they do actually drive forward electrification as they get a better understanding of what it really requires. So something that we proposed to the British Columbia government is a provincial fleet electrification feasibility study. We had 4 objectives for this specific study. This would include transit fleets across British Columbia, municipal fleets that include garbage trucks, delivery trucks, and so on, and additional transit vehicles. The feasibility study would assess in specific municipal regions within the province the energy required to electrify their fleets entirely, the economic analysis in terms of the costs associated with both the vehicles, the fueling systems, the charging stations, and so on to support those fleets, the GHG emissions that could be achieved if those fleets were entirely electrified, be it through hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric, and the ease of electrification in terms of the supply chain that would be required, in terms of the electric power that would be required from the grid, the draws on the grid, and so on. So this is what we propose, and we are working with the government in order to get this project funded so we can do an assessment within the province. This also feeds into another stimulus submission that we've done for a pan-Canadian feasibility study across multiple of the largest transit systems all across the nation as well. So those are the projects that we're working on at the moment, specifically within the hydrogen space, as we are a technology believer. We do support the promotion of Canadian developed technology on Canadian soil. If you have any questions regarding any of those projects or any of CUTRIC's other projects, I have my contact information here. Feel free to shoot me an email. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Gordon. I hope I didn't take you past time.
Well, it's all recorded, Addy. People can slow it down.
Perfect.
So don't worry. We've got plenty of time, and I appreciate everybody trying to stick to their 10 minutes because we are late. We've gained a few minutes. I just want to add one thing to what Addy said, and that is that Environment and Climate Change Canada actually put out a call for bids to do a feasibility study on starting a Hydrail locomotive switcher. And so that report has just been finished in the last month. I actually wonder if there's anybody from Transport Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada on the Zoom meeting right now. I did invite them to participate. They may not be ready to release it. That was meant to confirm feasibility, be a technical briefing, and estimate the cost. So as Mark and Addy have pointed out, researchers / industry could partner with some incentive funding from the federal government to actually get a switcher converted to Hydrail on the ground, because somebody's got to go first. As everybody's been said, it's a great idea in theory, but who's going to do it first? And I think that's where government has to step up, and they're looking at costs right now. So that's exciting. We do want to move to the US update, but Daljit, I did ask you to be ready. Do you have a few minutes that you want to provide on what Ballard's up to, or do you want me to just move on to the US? I'm going to leave it up to you. You can make the call because I know you're on. You have to unmute yourself though, Daljit, if you're here. I know you were. I haven't looked. I can see you're still. Okay, I'm taking that as we can move on. So Andreas, you are up. And I apologize. We've gained some time. We started 45 minutes late, but we've gained 10 minutes. So over to you, Andreas, with the US update. Thanks for being here and thanks for moderating.
Hello, everyone. And Gord, thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm really moderating a panel. Can everybody see my screen? Somebody just give me a heads up. Okay. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly and then give it over to our speakers because they have more interesting stuff to say. I'm giving a brief overview of Hydrail in the US, largely on current projects. A little bit about myself first. My name is Andreas Hoffrichter. I'm originally from Germany, but lived in the States now for 4 years. I've been in Hydrail for over 10 years now, implementation of projects as well as feasibility studies and introductions. Many of you will know me. I hold the world's first PhD in Hydrail technology, have constructed a locomotive and instrumented a locomotive and done many other studies. This is my second day with my new employer. Prior, I was with Michigan State University and leading their Center for Railway Research and Education. Yesterday, I started with Deutsche Bahn Engineering and Consulting here in the US, and I'll give a brief overview on them as well. So first, who is Deutsche Bahn? German Railways really is the direct translation. We are one of the major transportation providers globally. We are number one. You can see the statistics yourself, but we are under the top 3 for almost anything when it comes to rail and transportation. And what people often don't realize, we actually do provide air freight and ocean freight as well. We are active in the US. We are also active in Canada, largely at this point through our consulting activities, but that will hopefully change in the future as well. Where are we located? Here in the US, we have 3 offices at the moment. Our headquarters is in Sacramento, California, and our goal is to have a local team take the world's expertise from the transportation operator and also consulting services and improve the quality of life by introducing sustainable mobility solutions. And that clearly includes Hydrail and low and zero emission rail technologies. All right, right into what the US DOE and the Federal Railroad Administration are up to. They have hosted a workshop and created an initiative called H2 at Rail, which is part of the overall H2 at Scale initiative of the Department of Energy. They held a workshop at Michigan State University in spring of last year, and out of that came several projects that they are working on and reports that they're consolidating, and they should be completed in the next few months. Several of the national laboratories and some of the people on the line, Argonne as well as Oak Ridge, are involved in these, have been recipients of the money in actually conducting some of the studies looking into the rail sector as a whole. That includes passenger and various freight segments such as switching, but also line haul over the road freight locomotives. And we, as I mentioned, we will get the results soon. One of the anticipations is that the DOE and the FRA will actually fund some demonstrator projects because, as we've already heard, you can do all of the studies that you like. What you really need is something working on the ground to show that it actually does work. We will hear from the San Bernardino County Transportation Agency, from McDowell Engineering, embedded in North Carolina Department of Transportation, and from Caltrans, California Department of Transportation in more detail. I give a very brief overview of all of these, but then I really move on. So the San Bernardino County Transportation Agency commissioned a feasibility study where I was involved in low and zero emission multiple units, which was led by Mont McDonald and by Michigan State University. And we looked at the new rail service and a possible extension to LA Union Station. We found that Hydrail would be feasible for both options. Resulting from that, and Carrie will talk a lot more about that, SBCTA commissioned the first commercial hydrogen-powered rail vehicle, Hydrail vehicle in North America, which is obviously also a Siemens vehicle, which is going to be constructed and developed by Stadler. More details for Carrie here. North Carolina, we just completed a report at MSU for North Carolina looking into intercity passenger rail services. They are much higher power than anything Hydrail currently operating worldwide or any of the previous Hydrail demonstration projects. And we could confirm that it's actually technically feasible to operate that with a Hydrail solution. The Piedmont service connects broadly with Charlotte. It's locomotive hauled, different to the multiple units that we currently see. And Lynn will provide more information on that. Last, we have Momo presenting from the California Department of Transportation, largely the rail division. They own several locomotives and rail vehicles and would like to decarbonize all of them. They provide equipment to operators. Pretty much everything right now is locomotive hauled coaches, diesel electric locomotives, and overall the state has very ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gases as well as air quality impacting emissions. And they have demissioned DB engineering and consulting to investigate these alternatives to diesel, and we're working collaboratively with others on that right now. And Momo will actually provide you with more information on that. Okay. In this case, Carrie, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Andreas, for the introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, good, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so Andreas provided you the general overview of kind of the project. To give you a little bit more background, we're currently under construction, building a 9-mile extension on the San Bernardino line for the Metrolink system, which serves all of Southern California and provides connections throughout the state. It's kind of like the workhorse behind our freeways that helps us reduce greenhouse gases and gives people a more sane way to commute to job centers from our more suburban areas. We're about 60% complete on construction. We'll start service on this in early 2022, revenue service. And we'll start with 3 diesel multiple units that basically shuttle back and forth between the transit center over in this location and the University of Redlands over in this location. The vehicles that we've procured are the Stadler 2-car consist flirt, which you see up on this screen now. When we entered that contract, especially our executive director recognized that this power pack, it is basically, depending on the size of your consist, it's 2 Tier 4 diesel engines, or it could go up to 4. But they were just generators powering electric motors at the wheels. And we recognized there was this opportunity, and California is very forward-thinking and supportive, obviously, of zero-emission vehicle technology. And so we started working with the state and developed a plan to secure grant funding to go ahead and do the research and development, build the vehicle, test the vehicle, with the ultimate goal of it being incorporated into what we call the Aero fleet as one of the regular revenue service vehicles. Our partners have been key. Calsta, I mean, Momoko and Calsta are very important to us. I mean, not only did they provide us our funding, but they're there for consultation all along the way, which is extremely important. The Federal Railroad Administration will be our regulatory agency and probably our largest risk area as far as time delays. I think they're very good to work with, but that's one area this is new for them, and it's going to take a lot of just coordination and good information to them to feel comfortable. And then I'd like to highlight Metrolink. Metrolink will be the operator of this vehicle, and we are working in close step with them. SBCTA plans, mass transit plans, freeways and roadways, and we build capital projects, and we provide a lot of funding to transit agencies, but we are not an operator ourselves. Our phase, so we split this into phases. These are the key pieces of the first phase. I mean, we researched, we developed evaluation criteria, we assessed the different systems. We did a very good concept feasibility study that's available on our website that I would encourage you to go look at, with the goal of identifying the most compatible technology. These were the criteria that we used to weight the different criteria to help us come to a final recommendation to our board. We also did a really early on, we put a lot of work into screening, a high-level screening to narrow down how many propulsion options were studied in our feasibility report. And that's what you see up on here. I will say that SBCTA has a general adversity to overhead catenary that I think helped us progress along. We do have a project to build half a mile of light rail in our county, and it's estimated to cost almost $100 million, which is just, it's going to be hard for us to sustain that level of funding if we don't find a different way to keep building out our transit network. We looked at supercapacitors, we looked at hydrogen fuel cells on their own, we looked obviously at batteries, and then we looked at a hybrid of battery and hydrogen fuel cell, with ultimately the hybrid being our preferred alternative. As part of our grant from the state, while we are going to operate a 2-car consist, they wanted to take the opportunity to demonstrate as much potential as there is for Hydrail. So 2-car consist is what we're going to operate. So that's one scenario we looked at. I think that the most appropriate vehicle, if we're going to run to LA Union Station, is the 4-car consist. And so we're looking at that. And then because we are not building a 4-car consist, we had to look at a scenario 3 where we paired 2-car consists together and basically have to negate the weight of the Tier 4 diesel engines that wouldn't be in the ultimate 4-car consist that was hybrid, hydrogen and battery powered. We looked at vehicle characteristics, obviously, for all of those, what they weigh, their mass, loading condition, auxiliary loads. We looked at the track characteristics. We have in the 9-mile corridor, the initial corridor, we have a 2% grade one way. So that takes a lot of power. We are in a very warm area, so air conditioning is extremely important. And then we just defined the key requirements. So basically, this is the 2-car consist. There was a model created where we put all this data and key information into to create what our outputs would be. And that's what you see on the screen. So San Bernardino Transit Center to Redlands, that's our 9-mile corridor. That'll be our test bed. San Bernardino Transit Center, well, I'll just skip to the pink one at the bottom. So Redlands to LA is like our ultimate goal, to be able to demonstrate we can do this. So basically, we need to be able to run pretty much regular service on the 9-mile corridor and then demonstrate that this has feasibility to run into LA, which is about 60 miles more. These are the outputs from the 2-car consist modeling. So, well, these are the inputs, I should say, the velocity, elevation, curves, and grade. Then here's our outputs. So you can kind of see it definitely performs one way, going uphill, one way, the other, of course. And then I just wanted to include this. So this is the way the model changes when you have to extend this to Los Angeles. So you can see very different. And you'll see that in the summary table as well, that the amount of power needed drastically changes, which makes sense. It's just, that was important in staff making a recommendation to our board on what we thought the preferred alternative should be. One piece that we did is we wanted to really find out, do we need to capture regenerative braking or not? And so the slide that you see up there demonstrates that yes, it has a big impact, and it was worth including in the design. So just in our 9-mile corridor, on one of the runs, 60%, and on the LA run, on one of the runs, the 30%. Combined, 26, 22%. Here's the 4-car consist. I believe these slides are available on our website as well if you have any questions on them, but you can see that it starts increasing, and we have a summary slide for that. And then here it is for the 2+2, which we need just for demonstration purposes when we get out there and actually start running the ZEMU. And then here's the summary slide, providing what we needed with and without regenerative braking. So we looked at batteries, and then we looked at the, combining batteries and hydrogen fuel cells. And I think you guys all know what batteries are, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. Again, one of the areas that we were most concerned about was charging methods for batteries. Specifically in the Redlands, city of Redlands area, it's a heavy historical district. There would have been a lot of adversity to installing overhead catenary. We're also extremely constrained as far as right-of-way width in that area, because we do have historic buildings on both sides of the right-of-way that we just can't, we have to protect. In addition to the cost of building it as well as maintaining it over time. And this is, PEM hydrogen fuel cell stacked together, using an onboard battery can reduce the size of the hydrogen tank. We are in conceptual design at this point, so that, is being determined by Stadler, the builder. And then this is a summary of the high level conceptual systems characteristics. Here, what I would like to point out is when we started out, our goal was to have the same performance capabilities of the DMU. As we went through contract negotiations, we did agree to have basically a floor and a target. So because this is a pilot, we needed to be a little more flexible. So right now, as we're going through conceptual design, that's what we're working through right now. Yeah, that's your floor. That's the minimum you have to do, but our target is this. And so that's kind of what we're working through right now as far as performance. I think I've covered this, it really focused on, it didn't require wayside infrastructure to recharge. I think what we really found is that with the hydrogen fuel cell piece, it really did provide us the viability to extend to LA Union Station without having to build inline charging, and really gave us more flexibility, because that is our ultimate goal, is to allow this to be expandable. We approached it by what we want to keep as much of the DMU the same as we can, right? So ultimately, Metrolink's going to have to maintain these, and we don't want a one-off vehicle. We want to keep as much as we can the same. So we focused on that, and we came up with, it's going to be the tanks. It's going to be the fuel, different fuel tanks, additional volume or space needed compared to the diesel engine, the leakage monitoring equipment, temperature control, especially for the batteries, and then proper ventilation. And then I would just like to mention that we are building a maintenance facility right now for the Aero service, and that project was a little ahead of this opportunity to build a ZEMU. So we are working diligently to identify what needs to be modified in that facility, and it is not insurmountable. It's completely reasonable, and I think we'll be able to accomplish that. Now that's different than the hydrogen fueling infrastructure. That will be at the facility, and we'll initially truck in, and we'll have a mobile fueling unit. But I want to touch on a couple things. One is we, as SBCTA, does the regional planning for transportation. We just completed a zero emission bus study looking at our 5 county bus operators. And so we're developing a plan for implementation of that. And I see hydrogen as a key component of that. We do get a little pushback, I'll be honest. It seems people are much more comfortable building charging stations everywhere. And there is still a misnomer out there that is going to be more cost effective than hydrogen. And so we work hard to make sure there's a balanced and reasonable analysis done based on actual costs. Because when we did the feasibility study for this project, we did find that the hydrogen powertrain came in very close to the battery powered train cost-wise and life cycle cost-wise. And it's something out there that I repeatedly have to speak to, because there seems to be this automatic assumption that hydrogen is going to be more expensive. I think that one of the key things for us too is we had to put a lot of cost into wayside energy storage if we were going to look at battery, because the grid is so unreliable. So if we want to continue to run transit vehicles, whether they be rails or train, we had to have this incredibly robust wayside storage that is costly. So up here you see on the screen kind of our major milestones. We initiated conversations with the Federal Railroad Administration in September of 2018. We were awarded the funds in April of 2018. Our board unanimously approved the recommended propulsion technology in July of 2019. We quickly worked to get our vehicle contract awarded in November of 2019. So you can see we've been working very, very quickly to take advantage of the funding the state provided to us. There's a very robust plan for testing in Europe. We haven't seen it yet, but you can see by the timeline, it takes a lot of time. We'll be testing in the USA in 2023. I'd like to mention in that area, one of our key pieces of conversation right now is Stadler very much wants to do the testing in Europe, which we've agreed to or haven't opposed in the contract. But in working with Metrolink and I think working with the FRA, I think the Transportation Technical Center, TTCI in Pueblo, might come into play as we progress this delivery of this vehicle forward. And then revenue, our target for revenue service is in 2024. That's the end of it.
Great, thank you very much, Carrie. This is an extremely exciting project. It's you're selling yourself a little bit short. This is truly the first in North America doing this. And as you heard in previous presentations, there's often a perception from transit agencies and others that this technology can't work and they're relatively risk averse to actually make something happen. So it's great to see that SBCTA was actually open to do this and actually went forward and said, yes, we want to try something different. We want to change the world in our way that we can, and you're going forward with that. So thank you.
And Andreas, I was remiss. I missed one thing. I do want to thank Stan and Bill, and especially Stan, for their leadership that's gone on, throughout the years. Without that sense of leadership and pushing and education in the broader world related to this, I don't believe SBCTA and the state of California could progress this quickly. And this is very personal to me because where we're deploying it, the 9 Mile corridor, is like my hometown. And we have some of the worst non-attainment air quality in the nation. And so reducing the, while it may take us a little bit to get to 100% renewable or 50% or beyond 30% renewable, reducing the emissions at the tailpipe is extremely important for this area.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Because we have some time constraints, Lynn, you're up next.
All right. Thank you, Andreas. So let's see. All right. Sorry, trying to screen share here. All right. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yes, okay, great. All right, so just a little bit about me to start with. Again, my name's Lynn Harris. I work for McDowell Engineers and Associates. We are embedded consultants to the North Carolina DOT Rail Division, handle a wide variety of engineering and technical projects. One of the main ones being the drive to get North Carolina's passenger rail system to be clean, green, and environmentally friendly. That's been my major project for about the past 8 years. And I will be going into the details of that here today. The topics specifically I will be discussing are an overview of the NCDOT Piedmont program, just touch briefly on our clean technology research efforts to date, and then talk about our Hydrail research efforts, what conclusions we can take from that, and what the next steps are. And then if we have time, we'll of course do questions at the end. So to dive right in, the NCDOT Piedmont Passenger Rail Service is passenger rail between Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina. Currently have 3 daily round trip trains. We had 28 million passenger miles in fiscal year 2019. And our fleet currently consists of 8 locomotives, 5 cab control units, and I'll explain what those are on a subsequent slide, and 19 passenger cars. This is a map of our corridor. It's right through the heart of North Carolina. Some of the motivations for our air pollution reduction are that every county along the corridor, which is 10 counties total, has previously been indicated by the EPA as a non-attainment for one or more pollutants. There has been some substantial improvement recently. All the counties are currently classified as maintenance, but the Rail Division recognizes that we need to do our part to not let things get worse, especially in the future as we may add additional frequencies. We want to make sure we're not unduly contributing toward air pollution. The corridor also encompasses 7 of the top 10 urban centers of North Carolina, and greater than half the population of the state overall lives within a 1-hour drive of the corridor. So this is a substantial impact on the citizens of North Carolina. Just more about our operational overview. Again, NCDOT is the equipment owner and maintainer of the rail vehicles. We are operated by Amtrak. We're dispatched by NS and CSX. Our corridor is 173 miles in each direction with 9 total stops. It includes Raleigh and Charlotte. Our travel time is just over 3 hours each direction. So we're very, very comparable with car travel between the 2 cities. And our standard train configuration is 2 locomotives in a pull-pull configuration and either 3 or 4 coach cars, just depending on specific ridership for the day. Excuse me. Our fleet is 6 F59PH locomotives and 2 PHIs and 5 cab control units. A cab control unit is simply a demotored F59PH locomotive, so exact same exterior body, just everything stripped out of the long hood. It has no ability to propel itself. It's run in conjunction with a locomotive to provide pull-pull or push-pull operations. And we are currently planning to add 3 locomotives to the fleet beginning next year. Now, the actual motive specs for our fleet, our locomotives have 3,000 horsepower EMD 710 engines. That's about 2,200 kilowatts. And that's actually an interesting size to work with here because that's about the same capacity that a standard freight switcher or even some short line freight locomotives use. So one thing we can take from that is whatever we're able to implement should be easily transferable to the freight industry in that regard. And then our head-end power engines are on our newer locomotives, Caterpillar C18s, on our older legacy locomotives, Caterpillar C15s. Our older locomotives, which were all rebuilt between 2010 and 2013, our prime movers are currently EPA Tier 0 plus. The Caterpillars are Tier 2, and then our newer locomotives, which is 2 of our overall fleet, again, prime movers, EPA Tier 0, HEP engines are EPA Tier 3. So we've got a ways to go before we are all the way to where we need to be at Tier 4 or better. Our efforts to date include biodiesel fuel testing, retrofit emissions technology implementation, and then what we're all here for, Hydrail research, which we hope to implement within the next several years. Just touch very briefly on the testing we've done to date. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into tremendous detail here, but the Rail Division has worked with the NC State Environmental Engineering Department since about 2009 to test various blends of biodiesel fuel. And we have seen from that you can get anywhere from a 30 to 60% reduction of hydrocarbon, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter using lower blends of biodiesel fuel, about the 20 to 40% range. We see some marginal improvement on NOx, but not a ton, and that's to be expected. That's how biodiesel fuel typically operates. We did also build a retrofit selective catalytic reduction based aftertreatment system that we retrofitted onto one of our locomotives and have plans to implement similar systems on additional locomotives going forward. And that resulted in an emissions reduction of between 55 and 80% of all pollutants. So if we combine this retrofit emission system with biodiesel fuel, we should be able to achieve Tier 4 that way. And that is a really excellent bridge technology that can carry us for the next several years until Hydrail becomes much more standard. Talk a little bit about the Piedmont's setup and how it's actually very, very conducive to Hydrail implementation. Again, as I mentioned, we currently operate in a 2-locomotive configuration, pull-pull. We're planning to transition starting hopefully next year to replace one of the locomotives with a cab control unit. Obviously, you only need one engine for propulsion while the train is in operation. So we would then be in a push-pull configuration. And as I noted on a previous slide, the CCU is just simply a locomotive body with the engine removed. That open engine room is the absolutely ideal platform for Hydrail equipment and system implementation. This actually puts North Carolina in a uniquely good situation in that we could just drop Hydrail equipment into our existing locomotives. We don't need to add additional cars. We don't need to go out and procure new cars in order to get the technology implemented. And that's actually pretty unique in the U.S. rail industry to have this kind of setup that perfectly feeds into what would be desirable to do from an emissions standpoint. We do have the option of phased implementation. We would plan to, or we envision, I should say, something along the lines of first implementing batteries into the CCU to where you have a diesel locomotive, hopefully a Tier 4 diesel locomotive, using the technologies we've pursued so far, and then a battery-powered CCU augmenting that on the other end. Then subsequent to battery implementation, we could also add hydrogen tanks and fuel cells to where you then have a full-blown diesel Hydrail hybrid train. Later down the road, when our locomotives go up for their next rebuild, which would probably be within the next 8 to 10 years, we imagine that Hydrail will be established technology enough by that point to where we could just pull the diesel prime movers and implement Hydrail engines at that point, where we would have fully operational Hydrail trains. And then following that, we think we'd be at a position where we could be a model for national propagation of this type of a system across other comparable intercity passenger rail agencies, and hopefully, as I alluded to earlier, even short line freight. And that last bullet there at the bottom, this is actually pretty important. Our primary battery supplier has recently developed an operational battery switcher for an F59 PH locomotive body, which really means that we've crossed all the technological hurdles ready for this first step here of implementing batteries into CCUs. That would really just be an application exercise at this point. So making good progress on actually bringing this to reality. This next slide is just an example of what it would look like to drop a Hydrail drivetrain into a CCU, and also a model of a fuel cell. So I'll kind of gloss over that one in the interest of time. This is an image of the inside of our CCU. Again, it's just the long hood of an F59 PH locomotive, stripped of all engines, generators, and other auxiliary equipment. Andreas and I actually took some pretty detailed measurements of NCDOT's equipment several months ago, and it's about 52 cubic meters total, so we have a decent amount of space. One of the other things we can actually leverage to our advantage is that rail, of course, is not weight limited in the same way that cars and other vehicles are limited, so we can really pursue a heavier is better model, and keep that in mind as we're going about physical implementation of this technology. So the status of our Hydrail research. In 2018, NCDOT contracted with Andreas and his team at Michigan State to perform a feasibility study on NCDOT's Piedmont trains. As Andreas mentioned earlier, if we were to implement Hydrail in the future, we would be the largest rail fleet to do so. The feasibility study was actually just completed last week, and we're in the process of reviewing that, but it confirmed that a Hydrail propulsion system is feasible for NCDOT, specifically a 2-locomotive downsized fuel cell hybrid with a plug-in. And what that long name simply means is that we could divide the Hydrail propulsion components between the locomotive and the CCU. As I mentioned, our existing diesel engines are about 3,000 horsepower, and we could just simply put around 1,500 horsepower or maybe a little more in both the locomotive and CCU to create an equivalent propulsion powertrain to what we currently have. And we see best results if we recharge our batteries after each round trip between Raleigh and Charlotte. We have a captive fleet. All of our locomotives return to Raleigh every night, so that falls right in line with what's standard protocol for NCDOT. So we would certainly be able to readily embrace charging our batteries on a daily basis. The results of the study found that we actually see maximum energy savings when we have a 4 traction motor train. You get about net 45% savings. Another alternative is to use 8 traction motors, where in that case you still see very good savings, but not as good, only 28% versus 45%. So that would be a decision that NCDOT is going to have to make, and that falls into exactly what our next steps are, is an economic analysis to determine what is the preferred route, whether Rail Division management is going to want to see a trip time savings, and I forgot to mention that, is implementing 8 traction motors. You actually cut about 10 minutes off your trip time, which is, that's not insignificant. NCDOT has really made a big push over the past 10 years or so to try to save time wherever possible. So trying to figure out what's best from an energy savings versus trip time savings standpoint will be something that's going to require some further attention. We are at the point now, based on the results of the study, where we can pursue building a prototype or demo unit, and some of the major factors there are going to be to secure the funding to figure out how to do so, identify our supply chain, identify what tests are going to be required. We'll definitely be utilizing the H2 at Rail program that has been mentioned several times already. And the Hydrail report is going to be made available to the public for anyone who wants to see it after we get it finalized and blessed by everyone within NCDOT. I'll talk a little bit briefly about Hydrail infrastructure. This has been touched on several times already, but we'll talk about specifically for North Carolina. Again, the results of the study confirmed that steam methane reforming and biomass sources are going to be very viable for NCDOT, both result in significant net positive energy reduction. North Carolina is actually very well positioned to start producing hydrogen. We have a lot of hog farms and a lot of fertilizer production as major existing industries in the eastern part of the state, and both of those can readily be utilized to be the groundwork for hydrogen production. We also have options such as hydrogen from electrolysis with 100% renewable electricity. That actually results in some of the highest emissions and energy savings on a well-to-wheel basis. And North Carolina is also uniquely positioned to where we have a lot of extra electricity, surplus electricity from nuclear power. So we could utilize that as well and be able to actually just take grid power without increasing the fossil fuel dependency. So again, a net positive well-to-wheel. Another big thing to consider, of course, when talking about Hydrail infrastructure is transportation. We would initially be looking at delivery from off-site, via trucks when we only have 1 or 2 Hydrail-equipped locomotives. But we would also look into building a hydrogen plant as we expand our fleet in this regard. We're also very well situated for where we'd be able to possibly one day in the future build a larger multi-use hydrogen plant. The rail yard in Raleigh is located in close proximity to other industries like waste industries, the Raleigh bus terminal, and other potential long-term users of hydrogen. And one of the things the study found is that we see a net positive and almost indifferent well-to-wheel energy and emissions reduction with both delivery and on-site production. So we think we're set up very good in that regard. Just a few quick slides and then I'll wrap up. This one just shows a profile of the gradient and altitude over the Piedmont corridor. This is a quick snapshot of the results of the study for the preferred 2-locomotive Hydrail downsized with a plug-in option. And you can see the comparison of the hydrogen and power plant outputs. That second chart there is basically showing that the there could be sufficient battery capacity installed on the locomotive to allow us to make a full round trip, and then show that we have the power both at the DC bus and traction to allow the system to be feasible. This is a very quick snapshot of all of the 2-locomotive options that Andreas's team covered for us, and the net energy savings range anywhere from good to great. Again, the fuel cell hybrid downsized plug-in, which shows about a 49% fuel reduction and a 45% energy reduction, is going to be our plan A and what we focus on going forward. With that, I will wrap it up and hand it back to Andreas, and thank you all very much. And before I go, I would like to express my personal thanks and thanks on behalf of NCDOT to Andreas and the Michigan State team for seeing us through this project. We really feel like we've got something great with this study, and we're looking forward to having it take us toward clean technology in the future. So thanks all.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for the opportunity to assist you. It is truly a great project. And if North Carolina goes forward with that, it would be kind of a lighthouse project, as it's an intercity rail application. Pretty much everything else at the moment is considering more urban areas or multiple units. It's also locomotive application. And as you mentioned, the power levels are actually extremely similar to what you would see definitely in a switcher locomotive, also in road switcher locomotives, as well as many of the short line railroads. And so the class 2s and the class 3s could benefit from this work directly as well. In addition, once you actually have your 3,000 horsepower locomotive, the jump to get up to 4,000 horsepower isn't massive. So thank you very much, Lynn. Momo, you're next, and Momo has some restrictions through the state of California to not be able to use Zoom. So I'm going to assist her with forwarding the slides. So Momo, please just tell me when you need to change.
Okay, thank you so much, Andreas. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great.
Can everybody see the slides?
No, I can't.
At this point, no.
Not currently, no.
I don't see any slides.
Click on your screen to share.
Okay, I'll try again. Hang on.
There you go.
Can people see the slides now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay,
Thank
good. Okay.
Okay, great. So again, thank you so much for having me. My name is Momoko Tamaoki, and I will be briefly talking about Caltrans updates today. Next slide. And so I wanted to start my presentation by letting all of you know where I work, what I do, and then why I'm doing this. So I work for the California Department of Transportation, as Andreas mentioned earlier. It's also known as Caltrans. So Caltrans' mission is to provide a safe, sustainable, integrated, and efficient transportation system to enhance California's economy and livability. And within Caltrans, I work in the division of rail and mass transportation. And it's also known as DRMT, that's the acronym for that division. And then DRMT's mission is to make public transportation a viable #1 option for all. So basically, we want people to get out of their cars and start using public transportation at all times. And then within DRMT, I am the Office Chief of Assets and Equipment, also known as OAE. And the mission of the OAE is to manage and maintain safe, sustainable, state-of-the-art rolling stock equipment to integrate into California's transportation system. And within my office, we established the Fleet Management Program, also known as FMP. And one of the FMP's goal is to become an innovation leader in achieving zero emission and in fleet design. So I told you all of this not to confuse you with all the acronyms, but I just wanted to tell you that I absolutely believe in each organization's mission that feeds into the bigger organization and its mission. I personally truly believe that transition into zero emission technology is necessary for the environment, public health, and also for the economy. Next slide. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about Caltrans in the city passenger rail fleet. So Caltrans support 100% of the operation and administration of a Capital Corridor, San Joaquin Corridor, and Pacific Surfliner Corridor. So not many people know this, but we actually own 141 pieces of rail equipment that are utilized on those 3 corridors. And then we also lease a few equipment from Amtrak. So let's take a look at the locomotives that we have. So we have P32-8, those are old locomotives from the early 90s. We have 2 of those that we use as switchers in the yard, and then they are Tier 0 locomotives. And then we also lease P42 locomotives from Amtrak, and then we have a few of those in both Northern and Southern California. And again, they are Tier 0 locomotives. And then just like North Carolina DOT, we also have F59 PHI locomotives. We own all of them, and all 15 of them are located in Northern California. When we bought them, they were Tier 0 locomotives, but we received the federal funding from FRA back in 2013, and we upgraded them to Tier 2 engines. And then recently, we procured Siemens Charger locomotives on SC44. So we own 22 of them. We have 8 of those in Northern California and 14 of those in Southern California, and then they are Tier 4 locomotives. Next slide. And then these are the cars that we either own or lease. We have the California cars and we own all of them. We have 66 of them in Northern California. And then we also have a Comet cars. So those cars are very old car built in 1960s by St. Louis Railroad Company. And we recently rebuilt them with Amtrak in 2014. We have 14 of those cars utilized on San Joaquin Corridor. And then we also have a Surfliner cars. They are bi-level cars built based on the design of the California cars. So we kind of call them California 2 cars as their nicknames. And so we have 12 of those that we own in Northern California. And then we also own 10 of them in Southern California, and then 39 of those Surfliner cars are leased from Amtrak. So those were joint procurement between Amtrak and Caltrans. And then we also lease Superliner cars. Those are old cars that we lease from Amtrak. We have 11 of those in Northern California, and I believe we have 10 of those in Southern California. I'm sorry, 19 of those. And then we have 14 Amfleet and Horizon that we also lease from Amtrak, and then they are all utilized in Southern California. And then we also have 49 cars that are currently being produced by Siemens that will be deployed on San Joaquin Corridor in the near future. Those cars are a similar design to the Brightline cars that they use in Florida. Next slide. So where are we going from here? So the passage of AB 32, the California Global Warming Solution Act of 2006, was definitely the landmark legislation requiring California to reduce GHG emission to 1990 level by 2020. And I'm happy to say that we have met the goal. And so now we are working on the SB 32 that requires GHG level to be 40% below 1990 level by 2030. So that's what we are targeting right now. And then there was a governor's executive order, B-30-15, that also further required the GHG level to be 80% below 1990 level by 2050. And so we definitely believe that the transportation sector must play a large role in these reductions, which are the most aggressive in the country. And we can clearly see every day that climate change is already affecting California. We see extreme heat, more frequent and intense wildfires. We used to get wildfires in the summertime only, but now we see them in October, November, and even December. We definitely see poor air quality in many areas in California, drought, related public health concerns. I mean, you name it, we have them in California. So we definitely see what's gonna happen if we don't do anything about it. So we are working towards meeting these aggressive goals. Next slide. So how are we going to get there? So as you could see from the previous slide, California has set itself very ambitious emission reduction goals, both for GHG emissions and then also for other air quality pollutants. So by 2050, a reduction of 80% in GHG emission over all industry have to be achieved. That's what we said for ourselves. And the transportation sector accounts for about 40% of all GHG emissions. So I believe that in the transportation sector, and specifically in passenger rail transportation, because that's what we have control over, we can reach an 80% reduction even before 2040. But of course, in order for us to get there, this will require many, many changes to occur. So there's still a lot of improvement potential that's related to reducing the energy needed per passenger mile and proportionally the amount of emissions for example, energy efficient driving by the locomotive engineers and better planning to achieve higher railcar utilization rates. But to really achieve near zero emission or carbon neutrality, there is really no way around to transition to new and innovative technological solution and allowing to substitute fossil fuels. In our case, it's mostly diesel by renewables. Next slide. So what are we doing about it? So I was going to brag about SBCTA's EMU project, but since Carrie has presented this already, I will just say that we are a funding partner, as Carrie mentioned, and then also a stakeholder to this very exciting project. And I really appreciate Carrie for always keeping me in the loop of the project status and some of the key activities that are taking place. So for details information regarding this project, please look at Carrie's presentation from earlier. Next slide. The other things that we are working on is, this is pretty exciting. So it's a joint project concept development between Caltrans, California Energy Commission, Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, and California Air Resources Board. So we have been meeting on a regular basis since last March to share some information and opportunities, but we are really ready now to take our relationship to the next level. So the first thing we are trying to do right now is we are looking at each agency's goals and targets regarding the emission reduction, and we are trying to align them to really meet the state goals. It sounds really easy to do, but it's actually really difficult that we are finding because we are really taking the holistic approach. I think it was Jonathan who mentioned this earlier, but in order for us to be really successful in transitioning to this zero emission technology, we really have to take the holistic approach or we will not be able to be successful. So, so we are really looking at everything. We're talking about vehicles and facilities, manufacturing process, construction, recycling, and even disposal, well to tank, fuel production, utilities, economy of scale, you name it, we are looking at it. It will be very difficult for us to achieve all of those targets, but we are absolutely looking at it. So the next step for us is to have a few more working groups to really finalize our aligned goals and targets. And then we would also have more working group sessions to really develop the joint project concept in details. And at this point, we are probably looking at zero emission locomotives that could be a hybrid of hydrogen fuel cell and battery technology. It's really not easy because we are looking at this solution for inner city passenger rail. And those 3 state-supported corridors I mentioned, I mean, they are, even the shortest one is about 156 miles in total. The other two corridors are more than 350 miles. So it's quite a range that we are looking at. And so we are interested in working on the research and development project that is definitely intended for prototype construction, testing, and eventual revenue demonstration on one of those state-supported inner-city passenger rail corridors in California. We are still at very early stage, as I mentioned, and we welcome any partner who wants to provide subject matter expertise or funding, or even any advice on lessons learned or best practices. Basically, any support you want to offer, we'll take them. Next slide. Since I am representing California today, I also wanted to give you a quick update from GoBits. So they have been working on, in the process of developing the ZEV market development framework. And this framework will build on the success of the ZEV action plan from 2013, 2016, and 2018. And this framework will clearly communicate goals and responsibility of every state agency and players in the ZEV market in California. It will also empower decision-making at multiple levels to achieve market scale. And also in early summer, GoBits is releasing an updated versions of California's hydrogen station permitting guidebook that would be really helpful. And this guidebook will provide a comprehensive overview of best practices for the permitting and development of hydrogen stations. Next slide. And last but not least, I wanted to end my presentation with the good news from our partner, California Energy Commission. So they are planning on releasing grant funding opportunities in the following month, I think July and August, on the topics that's listed on the screen that may be of interest to you, the hydrogen stakeholders. So they also provided the links to the most recent public workshop that was held for each funding opportunity. So I will leave you to it to review and check it out. Again, thank you for the opportunity today to speak at this conference. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me and then also my colleagues from CARB, Energy Commission, and GoBits. Thank you. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Momo. I think it's very interesting and exciting what the state is trying to achieve. And even though you're all California, within different agencies, it's usually fairly difficult to actually align goals and get forward. I also really like the initiative of Caltrans as a significant rail vehicle owner and saying, hey, we want to contribute to that. How do we make it happen, and where do we go forward with this technology? And you're looking at other options than just overhead electrification, as that clearly wouldn't be an option. So thank you very much, Momo.
Thank you.
All right, back to Gord.
All right, well, that was fantastic and exciting. Wow. Momoko, I didn't see a university partner there. That might only be because Andreas has recently left MSU, but I put us in for wanting to help out or maybe embed one of our students as an intern if you ever want to work up with somebody north of the border with engineering. So now we move across the big pond over to Holger. So I was chatting privately with Holger. He's got a few presentations, I think, if I'm right. Should take about 30 minutes. So actually we're bang on time here, keeping to about an hour per update, but I think we're gonna have some time for questions and discussion after or during Holger. So folks, private chats are working great here. I'm getting lots of comments back and forth, but Holger, the floor is yours. So feel welcome to unmute yourself, share your screen, and welcome Germany.
Thanks a lot, Gord. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm using a headset and hopefully it works that way. I just opened up the first slide. I do it a bit flicky because I've got a presentation from Alstom, who's not allowed to participate in a Zoom meeting. So I'm doing two presentations at the same time. So, but hopefully we're going to manage that. So I'm Holger Busche. I'm the scientific advisor in Parliament. So I'm not I guess I'm the only non-professional on Hydrail in here. So I'm working at the state of Schleswig-Holstein, which is the northernmost state in Germany. And I'm working to Ingrid Nestle, which is a member of the federal parliament. So as these statements I'm doing here are all unofficial, so I just use my private address if you want to get in contact with me. Just at first, I just wanted to show you, Germany was hosting the Hydrail conference in 2014 and at the first time, so I just keep my sign in here from that one. And the interesting point is, and when we did our conference in 2019, we've been able to use the first Hydrail trains. And if I open up that curtain in here, you might see the diesel version of the Lynn trains down there. So I'm always aware of what's going on in this one. So just a short private remark on that one. So just let's start on this. I hope everybody can see the presentation quite well if I do it this way. Let's start with the motivation on that is if you look at the carbon dioxide production and the rest that is allowed to be emitted, we're gonna hit a wall sometime in 2030, 2035. So this is just in 10 to 15 years when we have to be out of carbon dioxide production completely. So that's coming up from the scientifics. Fortunately, Hydrail is part of a solution of that, while coal, gas, oil, and nuclear are not. So nevertheless, I just want to present more the competition that's going on in Europe already. So it's no longer just Alstom only, which I will start with because they've been the first, of course. Stadler and Siemens popped in also. And I want to talk about the competition of the intermodal competition, let's say, in between Hydrail, battery, electric, multiple units, and hybrids. Fortunately, some of that was already pointed out, so we can shorten that a bit. Nevertheless, for those who have been here last year, certainly remember Saskia Schulz, and she wins the Innovation Prize for the hydrogen refueling station for trains that she developed, and will replace the first try of a filling station in Bremerförde that we've seen there. So it's going to be much more professional because
Holger,
the one that was in, yes?
Were you going to share your screen?
Oh, sorry about that. Sure, of course. I thought you would do that.
Yeah, sorry. Abdul just pointed it out.
Here we go. Here we go.
Good catch, Abdul.
Okay. That's okay? Okay. That was the graph I wanted to show, that we were thinking of smoothing down the fade out of carbon dioxide in 2050, which everybody was thinking of, the environmental conferences since decades already. As we have done nothing in between the last 10 years, the point of, so what we've not saved in here, we have to save on the end of the line. So the point of shutdown of carbon dioxide is coming closer. So we're talking no longer of 2050 reducing 95 or 100%. We're talking about 2035, which is in 2015, and in 15 years from now. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. So we've got to hurry up with all the systems. Unfortunately, Hydrail is part of that solution. So, okay, so I've got here my slide for Saskia, which we met last year in Bremerförde. And she wants the prize, the innovation prize for her hydrogen refueling station, which will be much more professional. As last year there were still 2 rail cars in operation in Bremerförde, which is a small town I will show up in a moment. That will be extended by end of next year to 14 rail cars, and you can imagine that you need a really professional filling station for that. That is the one she designs, and she wins a prize for that. sooner or later, just a moment, I have to swap the presentation. So that's a presentation of Alstom, and they showed up that, can you see that actually? Okay, let's do it this way. That showed up that the timeline of the island is in good operation. So since 2016, they have 2 rail cars in operation. First in test operation. Now it's really in scheduled operation on the track, which I can show you in here. So this is Germany showing up in here. So this is about 1,000 kilometers. This is the state of Lower Saxony, and just close to Hamburg, which is around the B of Big Buxtehude in here, is the track which where the trains are in operation. So passengers are already using hydrogen railway systems. And the fun fact on that is, if you're sitting in the train, the people are used to diesel engines, and you can hear them clearly shouting to each other to cope with the diesel engines. But when the Hydrail train is coming, the people are still shouting, and suddenly they figure out we don't have to shout anymore because it's so silent. Hydrail trains are really silent. You can't barely hear anything of that. What's going on in there. So if you want to keep a secret, just don't talk too loud. The Corradi Island was traveling through all of Germany. They presented it in 6 different states of Germany. We have 16 of them. So they can do in snow, ice, and steep inclines. So it can be used in all over the country. All conditions are quite okay for the Hydrail train. There hasn't been any major problems on the tests. By the way, at the end of the day, in the moment, Lower Saxony ordered 14 trains, start in service 2021. So next year there will be the real fleet operation in operation. So, and 1 year later, at the end of 22, the area of Frankfurt, which is most likely the airport that you land in if you come to Germany, in that area, there will be another fleet of 27 trains by the end of 2022. So other states are still evaluating. Also Schleswig-Holstein, which is the state up here, has a tender for emission-free traction that was won by a battery electric multiple unit, but it's mostly due to the fact that the conditions of the tender was in a way that Alstom said we can't participate in that. So there wasn't really a competition in between the modes, battery electric mode and Hydrail. Nevertheless, this is the last slide of Alstom, showing that they're hoping and see quite a lot of potential. And about the potential in Europe, I will just switch over to my presentation back again. Let me see that. And hopefully, if I do this, it might work. Yes, here we go. So the thing is, in Germany and other European countries, electrification is not 100%. Just a moment, sorry about that. So percentage of electrified tracks, you see Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, something like 3/4 up to 100% of electrification. Germany is way down in here, just 60% of the tracks in Germany are electrified. So there's quite a potential for Hydrail to replace the diesel engines. And another point is, and that's why coming to Europe, is if you look at the borders and see the different ways across the border, the green ones here are the very few electrified lines that where you can cross the border. So if you look at the red ones, and you see lots of more of the red ones in here, they are all not electrified. And even if they would be, there's another problem in Europe. This is a map. Don't worry about the colors. They are technical details. Just we leave out in here. But if you see the map of Europe, these are different kind of electrification systems. So Germany is using the same electrification system like Austria and Switzerland, and funny enough, Sweden and Norway. But Denmark has a complete different system. They're using a French system, while France is separated in different train electrification systems also. So that makes it not very easy, but that makes it very easy for Hydrail trains to pop in, especially for cross-border services. And you certainly have heard about the Green Deal in Europe, and cross-border traffics will be very big part of that. So that's why Alstom came up to test the island also in the Netherlands, which is very north of Netherlands, 65-kilometer long line. I can show you on a map maybe later on. They have 700 kilometers not electrified tracks, and they are operating still 100 diesel multiple units over there. So there's quite a great potential for this one. And the Netherlands is is a country which is very hydrogen friendly. They have quite a lot of wind energy, which also produces quite a lot of surplus energy, which is not needed by the electricity grid in that moment when it was produced. There's another text about Alstom also confirms to go to UK in order to bring in hydrogen trains over there. Of course, they have got the same problem, and also coal power for power plants in the UK is fading out also, so they're popping in more and more renewable energies, which is also quite good for the Hydrail system. We have heard about the Zillertal project last year in Austria. So they've announced to have 5 rail cars, and they are also wanting 3 more of them. The funny thing on that one is they have narrow gauge. So the first test is announced for this year, so be curious on this one. And the regular service is just like in Frankfurt by the end in 22. Funny enough, we have a state around Berlin. The state that is around Berlin called Brandenburg signed a treaty to develop a new Hydrail rail car, which is much smaller than the one from Alstom, because this is a very rural area, and the Alstom rail car bears about 150 seats or so, which is far too big for most of that line. So they develop a new one. So there's coming up a competition in between companies. And we have this Railway Competence Center in Austria who's developing, just to mention that, the Schindler locomotive on Hydrail basis. We will see how this is going on, but this is just for completion. Interesting enough, another big player is coming in, and this is Siemens. Siemens Murrell. They are working on a Hydrail version on that one. So the I just have to push the video screen on the other side, just a moment. So they have a 200 kilowatts Ballard fuel cell system that they want to put into a standard rail car, Murrell, which can operate 160 kilometers per hour or even 200 kilometers per hour. So it might be also suitable for some kind of intercity services. And in contrast to the island of Alstom, which is originally a diesel rail car, this one is an original electric rail car. So that makes it much more interesting, having all the electric equipment already in the train, and you only switch to the fuel cell system rather than having a transformer for different kind of electricity. So this is the overview on the internal competition in between Hydrail. And I just can switch over to an intermodal discussion on competition. It's Hydrail, battery electric multiple units, and hybrid systems. Some of this was already mentioned before, but I just keep on that one. So you see here the yellow line, this is Germany. This yellow line is the one which is used by Alstom's Hydrail trains already. And you see all the yellow lines are non-electrified lines in Germany. So there's quite a lot spread all over the country, which is quite typical for Germany. Everything is spread all over the country. So there's no real main center where you can say everything is in there. Interesting enough, you see on the right side a map of hydrogen pricing. You see the green ones are very, very cheap and the blue ones are quite cheap and the red ones are quite expensive. So you see it pops up to, turns out to the coast where we have a lot of wind power. Where hydrogen is going to be cheaper, and you have chemical industries in the west where you have a byproduct hydrogen quite cheap, which is also here in the middle of Germany. Pops in. So hydrogen is available already in Germany, and Siemens did a study on how to compare electrical multiple units (EMU), diesel multiple units, Hydrail, and battery, BMU, by the environmental effect, the grid stability, the operational effects, the economy, the needed the savings on infrastructure, and the availability of resources. And you see all these different kind of trains have certain specifications, which turns out to be more or less important for your own train operating systems. So if you have the infrastructure like Switzerland for electrification, just go. It doesn't matter to you that the infrastructure costs is high for an electrical multiple unit because you already have it. If you have to install catenary systems, it's quite expensive. Then the EMU would just fail in points of the infrastructure and the economy. And Hydrail, you can see is the blue line in here, is quite a good mixture in between almost everything. So Siemens, and that's the most important point, did some kind of an evaluation, which kind of Murrell rail car should be used for which kind of service. So about the class of weight class of the rails, so standard, or if you have a lightweight, and the speed. So almost everywhere 160. Well, this train can even go 200 kilometers per hour. And how much is the range? That's the most important question then in most cases. So you can go with the battery about 80 to 120 kilometers. And with hydrogen, you can easily do 900 kilometers. So if you have an operation that is only on a short distance and you can charge at the end of the line, it might be, if electricity is available, clear, cheap, and always available at any times, that the battery train might be the better solution. But if you have a lot of surplus power, and you can shift the production of hydrogen, so the usage of electricity by time, then hydrogen pops in and will have good chances to be used. At the end of the day, Siemens is pointing out that the future will be hybrid. So the future will be hybrid is in here. So they have always going double tracked, which is quite a good strategy always in train operation to be double tracked. So you have the battery electric multiple unit and the hydrogen electric multiple unit. The interesting thing is that they plan to have even the Hydrail train with the catenary system. So that enables them to be flexible. So use the direct power of the catenary system and use the hydrogen where you don't have the infrastructure for that. So this is by the, you have seen already on that screen. I'm glad about your attention, and I just made it just in time, 8 o'clock. So was a bit quick, but I hope you got the point. We have got to hurry up. The climate change is coming faster than we want to have it. And everybody believes still now that we have time until 2050, but actually we don't have. The second point is Hydrail is good solution, part of the solution. and the competition is coming up, and that's most important. So it's no longer just like in the old East, when you have just one manufacturer and one certain specification how to use it. The competition in between different companies, different services is always a driver to force progress. And I think that's a good point on that one.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Holger. That was awesome. And I did type you 2 private questions, which I'll repeat here. Your last point was about the fact that even the Hydrail train will have the opportunity for catenary charging. Doesn't that open up the possibility of having onboard electrolysis to produce hydrogen as well then?
Technically, well, for engineers, there's nothing too difficult, especially for German ones. They build you everything you want. But the question is, does it make any sense to do so? For short time, so if you stop the train, you can use the brakes, the engine as a brake, and you get the electricity back. You can store that easily in a battery. So there's no use for you turning this into hydrogen back again. As the Hydrail train is possible to do an all-day trip, so the all-day service, so if you go 80 kilometers an hour, 15 hours a day as an average speed, you will end up at 1,200 kilometers, and the Alstom train is even capable on that one. So there is no need, as for passenger trains especially, for producing hydrogen on board, which also adds weight and adds cost and so on and so on. You always need the catenary system. No, I don't believe that this is an economic solution.
Okay, at least not for passengers.
God, Daljit here. Actually, there was a project which was put forward by vehicle projects. Andreas will know this. In fact, they applied for some funding through UK government, where they said, okay, we will wherever the catenary exists, let's operate on catenary and then have electrolysis on board. But as soon as you come out of catenary, then we will start using that hydrogen to run the train. But unfortunately, never made a technical or economical sense to carry so much of, technology on board. But this has been thought of. I'll see if I can dig out some information on that and send it your way.
Okay, thanks for that, Daljit.
I can say something to that project because I was directly involved with it.
Sure.
In the UK, actually conducting the study. I can't say too much because of confidentiality agreements, but Daljit did summarize it properly. Even so you could technically do it, it doesn't necessarily make sense to do so.
What about for freight trains?
It's a very similar problem, right? Why would you want to electrolyze water when you have electrification infrastructure? First, you have to have the electrification infrastructure. You have a lot of additional weight. You could have a bidirectional system where you can use the fuel cell also as a generator for hydrogen, so as for electrolysis potentially. But again, you have to have the infrastructure. One of the main things that you actually want to avoid with Hydrail is having this expensive electrification infrastructure in the first place. Now, what would make a lot more sense is if you use a bimodal train, very similar to what Holger presented about the Siemens Murrell, or also what North Carolina has been looking at, is when you have electrification infrastructure present, use that and then use the hydrogen option, probably with batteries, due to regenerative braking for most service types when you don't have the electrification present. And that's exactly one of the projects going on in the UK right now with the Hydroflex train. That's exactly their approach.
Beautiful. Okay, so opportunity charging makes sense and electrolysis doesn't make sense economically.
I just raised my hand on that one, just for
sure.
Comment shortly. Well, the idea of using electrolyzers on board might be that you need more energy stored in the train and you want to recharge it somehow while in operation, because you are on long mode operation. as hydrogen storage is quite a large volume. But I'm pretty convinced there's a very good scientific approach in southern Germany, in Bavaria, on using certain chemicals as what was it, LOHC, liquid organic hydrogen carrier, which is some kind of an oil which is used in transformer stations, just an ordinary product that you can buy from chemical industry. And the hydrogen is going to be chemically attached to that chemical, to that oil, and get extracted. So you have two different kinds of oils, and they are swapping always around. And so this fueling of that train will be as easy as fueling a diesel engine, because it's just a liquid at normal temperatures, at normal pressure. So you don't have these 35 megapascal tanks on a train. You're just using just a normal liquid. So, and the storage of that, storage possibility is just like a fourth or a third of diesel fuel. So you can just need a bit more tank in an engine to have enough energy that you don't need the electrolyzer anymore, and it's much more efficient and easy.
Is that what Saskia's station does, or is she going?
Oh, no. She's doing on gaseous. But the Alstom train using 35 megapascal gaseous hydrogen. So that doesn't help you in this moment. But they have in the some kind of university in Erlangen, which is close to Siemens, these test facility for these chemical, let's say, action and reaction.
Okay, very interesting.
Sounds like a good insert for Hydrogen Motion about our low pressure storage. So I can't help but put a plug in, and you can get that offline, have a discussion on that.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Grace and Holger, you might want to connect as well. I don't know, Grace, if you've talked to Holger before, but definitely, or maybe Holger, if you've got connections. I did just send you a request to connect us with Saskia to talk about her hydrogen stations, but that other connection, I know last year's conference there was a gentleman presenting about storage. I don't know, I don't think it was about the one you just mentioned, but these options, it's amazing. It's just amazing, the flexibility. So folks, it's 11. It's just after 11 our time. So Holger, what is it, 8 p.m.? What do you
Yes. Just shortly after.
You're still have light coming through the window. I guess your sunset is what, 9:30? I can see light through curtains behind you. I don't know if that's a true, is that light from outside, or is that?
Yes, that's just my normal sun. So,
okay, so
we are quite a lot of north of you, so we have still sunlight at 11 p.m. or so.
Oh, okay. So, folks, I wanted to just open the mic up, the Zoom mic, shall we say, to anyone else that wants to update us on hydro research or all things affiliated, because you know, we do I think have participants from Japan and elsewhere around the world as well, and various different time zones. So I just want to pause here and say, folks, jump in. Anybody else want to contribute here? And I want to thank everybody that has jumped in. This is fantastic. This is exactly what I hoped would happen, despite the fact we were constrained with just an online abbreviated conference, constrained greatly. But you know what? Wow, this is awesome. And Momo and Carrie, boy, maybe it's going to be 2 years away because we're going to host it next year. But we want to come down to California, have you show off what you're working on for us. It's exciting times, and I don't know, maybe it's going to be a tug of war because, like Holger said, there's all sorts of competition going on across Europe as well. So, but it is amazing. I'm very excited. It's been fantastic. Any And thank you, Holger, for sharing your email. Any other thoughts by anybody? Because we should, you know, it's just after 11. We got lots of time. So what are people thinking?
Gord, this is Greg Moreland. Pete Devlin was not able to make it. He asked me to participate for him. He would like to say that as a follow-up to the H2 at Rail workshop from last year, there's been a continuing dialogue with FRA. The Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Office is investigating the technical economic analysis, or T, of selective locomotive applications, and plans to have public information to share on the analysis later this year.
Excellent, excellent. And that'll be publicly available, downloadable from your website or something like that?
You know, that would be the plan.
Excellent. So north and south of the border in North America, we've got activity going, and this is exciting times. And I you know, I can't say too much. Again, like Andreas, we've got NDAs with different partners in industry, but I know there are railway folks on the line with us both. Actually, they represent the freight industry in Canada. I don't know if there's, I guess Lynn is passenger in the US. I don't know if there's anybody from the freight industry in the US on the line, but they're kicking the tires. I mean, it's a good time, and you know, it's not a coincidence that Andreas is with Deutsche Bahn now, and I think he's going to be a leader across North America, helping folks retrofit and implement, and it's I'm looking forward to the days ahead. I think it's going to really help us clean up.
Gord?
Yeah, Stan.
Stan Thompson, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
I want to mention that Argentina is now taking note of Hydrail, and that is the first South American attention we've had on it. And I am very pleased at that. Also, the commitment of Australia and Japan to hydrogen in general is bound to complement the Hydrail things. And so I am watching those particularly closely, and also New Zealand. And just wanted to draw everybody's attention to the fact that the activity there is going to be very useful to us. Also, I am absolutely delighted. Bill had to go to another meeting, but I'm absolutely delighted with what you've done here. It's changed my whole view of what can be done online, and it couldn't. I'm just extraordinarily grateful, and so is Bill. And you've moved the ball down the field a lot. Thank you so very much.
Well, right back at you, Stan. I was monitoring participants. We got up to 40, and that's amazing. That is amazing for me for online. So this is really exciting. And so next year, Janet, it gives us a little bit of an idea of the demand. I mean, I don't know. I would expect at least twice that many participants in person, and especially with the background behind you now showing. We're showing off some pretty grand geography here.
Well, as an update for everyone on the line, we did have over 60 individuals already registered for the conference that was meant to take place this week here in the Okanagan. We were planning on up to a maximum of 175. One of the items it would be really great to hear from people about is just feedback as we're planning for next year. We were thinking there would be value in having a trade show, like a B2B component, where companies could exhibit and talk about their products and services and innovation. And so any feedback you might have on how that could be structured best to meet your needs would be appreciated.
Good. I would like to update on certain other activities around the world that did not get a mention during the presentations here.
Sure, go ahead.
China, as you know, we've got 2 programs in China with CRRC. So China is operating a tram program with the fuel cell. And they also have a train. Basically, they have integrated 2 trains and there are 10 trams. Right now, because of the COVID situation, they basically are not running these, but they've got big plans as far as the fuel cells and the trains are concerned in China. And in the times to come, we'll hear a lot more from China on this. As we speak, there are 2 expression of interests open out of India. One is for a, like a 3-coach or a 4-coach train. And then there is a kind of a special train that runs in the northern part of India between, Simla and Kalka. I don't know, those who know the geography of India. Simla used to be the summer capitals of the Britishers during that era. And Kalka is roughly about 200 kilometers south of that place. That's a very hilly terrain actually. And that train is a very special train, just 1 coach, runs like a bus. So they want to convert that into a fuel cell train.
Wow.
There is a program in South Korea, in fact, which has gone to our friends Horizon Fuel Cells. So that got announced a couple of months back. Brazil is looking at fuel cell train. In fact, what they want to do is convert their ethanol into hydrogen and use that as on the train. I believe Engie is involved in that particular program. And in Europe, we are working on a couple of shunt locomotive programs, which are again funded by the fuel cell hydrogen and joint undertaking. And Metro Links didn't get a mention. Last year there was a RFP out where Go Transit wants to do all their RERs with the electric train. We think that there will be a good mix of fuel cell and electric train that both Alstom and Siemens are involved in that. They have provided the feasibility study to Metro Links. So these are the other activities that are on, and as the time goes by, as we learn more and more, especially from Europe, because that's the hub of the electric train. This is going to catch on very well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
May I make a comment? Speaking of Europe, and also speaking of South Korea, I believe there are now 5 countries that have committed to completely eliminate diesel rail traction in 15 years. So a 15-year threshold seems to be emerging as kind of a consensus view. I think Sweden has mentioned that, and that would include freight. And the UK, of course, is looking at a 20-year increment. I anticipate that the UK will get in line with the other nearby countries. And I would like to see Germany. I don't think Germany has made an all-out buy date, but I would love to see, France has, I would love to see Germany and France jointly say that we will have all diesel rail eliminated by 15 years, which would put them in harmony with several other countries. And planning that idea is the reason I'm saying this. Thank you. Thank you.
Schleswig-Holstein is also already aiming to that.
Awesome.
Gord, can you talk a little bit about the Southern Railway project or not really?
Well, I think Laz is on, or he was online, but absolutely. So one of our first industry partners was Southern Railway of BC. And they came to us because, as Grace mentioned, they're actually paying emission penalties. They've got, what are they, tier 1? I don't know what they are, Andreas. I think they're tier 1.
They're probably even tier 0 there, unless they have been upgraded.
And so we've designed a Hydrail retrofit, and we went across the Rockies to Alberta. So I'm in the most western part of Canada, and just on the other side of the Rockies is Alberta, second province over, to talk to our oil patch friends who are suffering hard times, to see if some of their oil rig fabricators would partner with us on fabricating the necessary retrofits for a locomotive to be converted from diesel to hydro. And the gap is a money gap. It is theoretically possible, technically possible. You know, our design is there and everything's sized right. We did a duty cycle monitor, and we're still, you know, we just before the pandemic had about to submit, and we're working now with Hydrogen in Motion, like Grace said, to ask for the gap funding from our federal government, and that's been put on hold pending. Can't work in person, travel much until this we get back to normality or some sort of normalcy. We don't know what that's going to look like, but certainly that would be the first retrofit of a switcher in Canada. We've got other industry that are also interested in the exact same thing, and we're talking about just like Lynn and what you did for him, Andreas. You know, it's about right sizing the retrofit engine from diesel to hydrogen fuel cell battery hybrid. So you have to first instrument an existing locomotive to see what its duty cycle looks like, and you know, Carrie mentioned it as well. It's and Momo, you know, what energy is being used, what's the net energy demand, where's the peaks, the valleys, everything in between. And so, you know, it's pretty standard stuff. It's been going on for decades when you're dealing with a diesel engine and you specify what you need. But Hegazi's now developed a bit of an expertise himself in remote monitoring, because we're up here in Kelowna, and we've got folks talking to us from across the country, across the continent, in fact. But you know, we can go out. Instrumenting is pretty easy, but now collecting and vetting, cleaning, and then analyzing the data is the key to a good design, to understand what the demand for energy is, and it's transient right throughout the use of the vehicle, whether it's passenger or freight. So yeah, we're going with Southern Railway. We're there. We you know, the Hydrail 1 prototype that Hegazi's just about got out the door as well, you know, for very reasons we already know about, has been delayed. That was just to get us one more step towards full size, and then Grace's grant with Hydrogen Motion got us the next step up, 1/4 size, and then the final was going to be full size retrofit. Pretty close. Hey, I think that was, maybe I'm wrong, but anyways, that's an update from Southern Railway. And Laz, I have to apologize because we have been delayed, but it's, you know, research, slow but sure we get there. We want to make sure we do it right, right? We're in a risk-averse industry. We do not want to say, yeah, it'll work and go full steam ahead. Actually, I should say full hydrogen ahead now, and not get it right. Because we probably have about one, maybe two shots, one shot probably at getting it right. And in a risk-averse industry, you have to get it right. We all know that, right?
So Gordon, and this actually question would go to everybody, Stan, Tamiko, Greg, Dalji, Holger, et cetera. What are the main barriers now for a rail operator, a you know, transit agency or a freight company or whomever it is, to starting to place orders for hydrogen fuel cell or hydrogen Hydrail products? Is it product availability, the provenness of it? Is it hydrogen availability? Is it regulatory? What is needed to start seeing a broad uptake in that? I'd like to hear a discussion on that.
If I have to bet my money, hydrogen infrastructure. That's the biggest barrier, you know, basically because the limitation in the range is just because of this. Like you could run a train today between here to Toronto if you had, let's say Vancouver to Toronto, if you had, you know, like in the olden era, we used to get water on board with the steam engine. Same thing you'll have to do every 400, 600 kilometers. We should have hydrogen infrastructure so that while the train is at the station, we could fill her up and go for another 600 kilometers. The biggest challenge basically is the hydrogen infrastructure or the ability to carry so much of hydrogen on board. Like there's a lot of talk, okay, why not to put a hydrogen tender in the train? and run the train. But then, all the safety and all the FRA regulation, all that is a problem. So hydrogen is best stored the way it is right now. Whether we do it with the, with what Grace proposed, or there are certain other systems. That's the biggest challenge. Technology, fuel cell technology-wise, drivelines as it is electrical. That's not a problem. Fuel cell and the battery technology, I think, is much advanced that it could be done, but it is the hydrogen infrastructure.
If I could say one more thing. From the vehicle design point of view, it's you don't want to buy new vehicles. I mean, the railway companies don't want to go buy new fleets of Hydrail vehicles. So that's why we're focused on retrofits. But retrofits are a very custom solution. They do produce a lower capital cost because you don't have to buy a whole new locomotive. You just have to retrofit what you have. So it's cheaper. But it introduces its own design challenges. You need optimal designs for a variety of rolling stock. And that's something that we're looking at. It's we haven't seen so far something that's plug and play. And the companies that do have Hydrail vehicles like Alstom will just sell you the whole unit and not something for your own needs, right? They have a final finished product. It's like an iPhone.
Yeah, I would.
In case of, go ahead, Carrie. Go ahead. You're probably going to say what I'm going to say.
Well, from United States perspective is we have Buy America compliant requirements. So while in the case of the ZEMU, we would love to partner with DOE, and we have talked with them and we find them a good, collaborator. If we put any of the DOE money into our project, then now our vehicle needs to be Buy America compliant, which creates more, complexity when we're trying to develop the first one that's out there. So I would say that. I'd also say for the FRA is crashworthiness compliance. So that's one of the avenues that we're hopeful in keeping the ZEMU as close to the DMU, the original FLIRT vehicle, as possible, that we will not be opening up crashworthiness compliance questions.
Is that an issue in Canada as well? Does anybody know?
Yes. So typically what Transport Canada does is they follow the US regulations, not in everything, but in many things. The good news is that the railway system in North America is so closely linked that whatever Canada does is usually fairly applicable to the US and vice versa. So any of the progress that SBCTA is actually making with the FRA would very likely be accepted by Transport Canada as well.
Yeah, and just to echo those sentiments, I mean, there is virtually nothing defined right now at an FRA level regarding what the crashworthiness requirements are going to be for any type of hydrogen-propelled passenger train. So that's something that we're all going to have to work hard to develop over the next couple of years before this technology becomes readily available, so that we can implement it in a timely manner once it's a commercially available product. To answer the original question, the issue that most state agencies are facing is just simply capital cost. I mean, even when you're talking about retrofitting, you're still talking many millions of dollars, and that's just far beyond the budget of even what robust state agencies have. So really, that's the major hurdle to overcome, is how are we going to come up with the initial pile of cash to get this technology implemented? I mean, I think we're actually at a point where the actual application engineering is not going to be a gating factor. I think the construction of a Hydrail vehicle is reasonably understood at this point, even though, to the point Mohammed made, it is going to be somewhat customized for individual rail agencies that are trying to go the retrofit path. But between that and between defining the regulatory crashworthiness requirements is going to be the big obstacle in moving this forward over the next few years.
Are there any companies that do that retrofit and would have a vested interest in sort of, helping to shepherd through some of this crashworthiness testing?
So the Jonathan Baynes and Penticton Union are looking at it, helping get that exact industry started. And that will be probably the subject of business opportunity discussion at next year's conference. That was intended to be a significant chunk of this week. There are, Cummins does diesel retrofits. They're now in the business and they're looking at getting into that more. So they'll probably be there next year as well. Andreas can probably speak to that as well. Right now, it's still very custom. I don't think there's one person doing retrofits big time for Hydrail. It's a huge business opportunity. And in fact, I don't know if you folks are looking at your chats, but Holger just wrote a very important point. I agree that we need that business case. It makes sense. And in fact, when we went to Alberta to talk about finding a partner to get into retrofits for us from the fabricators, there were several short lines there who actually were very interested in a retrofit for the reasons that Hegazi Mohammed had mentioned. It's particularly attractive to them. They've got huge fuel costs. One thing that nobody has mentioned, and Stan, you can jump in and correct me, but I think I'm pretty accurate, crew training. And this is a big one. To get over the mental hump. I actually don't think, practically speaking, based on last year's tour in Hamburg, that there's really a big crew training component to this, but there still has to be crew training to get them to see it's like operating a diesel train. I mean, apart from refueling, which I understand is being resolved as well. But what's exciting to me, and I was messaging Hegazi and some of my students on this, is I'm going to take my railway systems engineering course, which looks at the cars, which looks at the tracks, which looks at the infrastructure, the fueling, and try to transform that in terms of our focus into how could we design a system, looking at all the answers that were just given to Mark's question, including business case, to support transition to zero emission Hydrail railways, because that's what we need. The next generation of engineers and businesses and all the other professionals will be to transition us, right, to retrofit us.
Gord, I think you raise a really excellent point there. There is going to be a massive PR angle to this regarding all the various agencies that come together to operate a passenger train. I've seen that already in North Carolina, not only with our Amtrak crews, that they've actually been reasonably amenable to it, but one of the other big PR areas I think is going to require a lot of attention over the next couple of years is with our maintenance crews. I've had a lot of our mechanics just push back tooth and nail of, I don't want anything to do with this hydrogen propulsion technology. And some of it is just the instilled public misconception of hydrogen, but at the same time, and I know this is not unique to North Carolina, there's the mentality of anything that's different is a subtle way of saying you're trying to take my job, and excuse me, and that's quite obviously not the case. And I've tried to push back on people with, give peace a chance here. You'll see this is actually a simpler system. It's going to make your job easier. But just getting people to overcome their preconceived notions and misconceptions is something that is going to require a collective effort on all of our parts in order to overcome. And it's certainly doable. I mean, I think here again, by the time this technology is mainstream, it will be widely accepted enough to where things will at least be more manageable. But we would be remiss in not starting to pay attention to that now.
Speaking to that, Lynn, Stan Thompson, it can't be economically brought about by the people who are already in the industry and know about it. It has got to become familiar to the people who have nothing whatever to do with it, except for the fact that they ride it, that they invest in it, that they fund it, that they pay taxes related to it, and that they vote for people who are making decisions based on it. It is to try to do it from within the industry is like pushing the string across the table. You got to have the public saying, hey, let's do this because we're doing it in the trucking world, the airplane world, the marine shipping world, and of course, why not the train world? So the public needs to ask for it subtly. They're not going to demand it, but just be aware of it. and then we don't have to push the string across the table.
Could I just back that up? I think it's Jonathan Baynes here. So my work in business transformation, what Stan said is exactly what our experience is. So those who are at the pinnacle of the previous paradigm are often the most resistant to the new paradigm. Partly it's because they've invested so much in an old infrastructure, their careers are at the pinnacle. Why would they want to take a risk on some sort of new technology? So in our experience, what we're doing is we're working with the sort of small to medium-sized players. We've got a meeting in the next 2 months with I wouldn't say significant, they're significant to us, but they would be regarded as a small to medium-sized company based in Cologne, actually, that produce eco-friendly sort of systems and technology systems for the rail industry. And our intention is to see, can we develop a partnership with them that gives them entry into this market space? So it's those small, medium-sized companies we're finding that are seeing this as their opportunity to take a real step up in the industry. The very big players have no interest in speaking to us. We've been fortunate with Fortis Gas to have entry at a very senior level. We're taking a sequential approach. So our partnership with Fortis BC is around the production and insertion of hydrogen into the existing gas line. So they've done enough research to work out that is now possible. We just need now a contract and agreement that can be nailed down that allows us to do that. Once we have confirmation that they're going to be the primary sort of buyer of our hydrogen, the very next step that we want to have in running up in quick order is entering into the sort of retrofit kit assembly plant, and that'll be working very closely with a commercial company that's already in the place, as well as very closely with guys like Hegazi and UBCO. So what we do then is, in order to try and sort of inform or push policy, my position working for a First Nation is that we use the First Nation influence as much as we possibly can. So we have a relationship, a very good and strengthening relationship with the Citizen Potawatomi Nation in Oklahoma. And they've just recently started an Iron Horse Industrial Park. And we found out quite quickly that they have these farm trains that go through the states. And I would say almost the majority of them run through Oklahoma. It seems to be like a train hub. So our conversation and our partnership with Citizen Potawatomi and the folk down in Oklahoma is going to be critical to sort of the implementation of this as a rail. So what we're trying to do is line up ourselves, make sure we're involved in the production cycle, the distribution cycle of hydrogen, and then very quickly have another business that can be involved in the assembly of retrofit kits. For us in Canada, the reality is, while we may have some of the expertise, we don't have the market. The market, from my perspective, exists in the States. And when we deal with the sort of smaller train companies, they seem to be a lot more open to this conversation. We've got a meeting lined up next week with the DOE based on the conversation, the last hydrogen webinar we had with Mark, and they're very interested. So anyone who's awake acknowledges the fact that the current energy and economic system we have is not sustainable and is not going to be staying. So what we find are those awake people tend to not be sitting in very big companies. And so, yeah, we will just use everything we can to work with smaller, medium-sized companies who can iterate and be flexible. I think, to Stan's point, is those huge companies have the cost of them to pivot and adjust to this new space is huge, and any CEO is probably not willing to take that gamble before his retirement. And so, from our side, why bother working? Let's create a groundswell. It's important to me that happens within the context of reconciliation, especially for First Nations being able to be a part of this new energy economy that is aligned with their values around creation. That's really important. We do that together with the groundswell Yeah, just on protecting the planet. I think this is for want of a better word, a movement that is unstoppable. It's great that Europe have plowed the way so we can point to some success stories. We're not doing anything from scratch. It's just a matter of, is this the right time? And finding the right partners. I would seriously suggest that if you're a big player, you ignore this movement at your own peril. But that's fine. I think we need a change. I think we need an economic change. I think we need a greater distribution of wealth away from some of the bigger companies. So this is a really exciting time to be alive.
Well said, Jonathan. I just want to put a plug in for you guys all, or may remember the IBM story where they had a group called Skunkworks, and they would be in a dark little room somewhere, 10 people, kind of working on the next generation. What do they see? The SWOT analysis. The MBA geeks will understand where I'm going with this. What's coming up? What are the challenges? What are the threats? How do we stay ahead of the game? How do we stay on top? And so they, look at, scan the environment and come up with, oh yeah, and then they'd work on things and come up, and they would spin companies off as they came up with these fantastic new products and ideas. Well, there are those skunkworks, or whatever they're now called, in these big companies. I know because I'm talking to some of them that are actually on this Zoom. And so they recognize exactly what you say, Jonathan. Big companies that ignore this are ignoring it at their own peril. So they will not. Yeah, go ahead.
The irony is, you look at the Quartz watch. It was actually developed by a Swiss watch manufacturing companies within one of these skunkwork departments. And so even working within those big departments, they tend to not acknowledge those new ideas, even within their own departments. So those new departments will very quickly, those guys will leave and create new companies. That's sort of how that works.
Yeah.
So you look at Kodak's unwillingness to respond to digital filming and digital imaging. That invention came out of Kodak. And so, this is an incredibly exciting time for disruption. Ironically, things like pandemics and economic crises create a beautiful and fertile ground for this sort of disruption. So for me, this sort of a crisis creates significant opportunity for some things to change.
I would just add, like, a good example of that is SpaceX, right? So that just happened on Saturday, right? At a fraction of the cost under the traditional model, and relatively quickly. US wasn't putting people in space any longer, and a private company came in that is non-traditional and disrupted that process so far successfully, right?
Yeah.
And in a more sustainable fashion.
Yeah.
And the encouragement is Elon Musk in doing that was sidelined. He was said he's crazy, and dismissed, but dismissed by the mainline people. You had Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy, being told that his solution's never going to work ever because he's never turned a profit. Like, the amount of criticism that you get, the key for me is making sure we're not ignored. And you meet with some of the political guys, normally it results in not a lot apart from hot air. You shake the dust off your feet and you move to someone else. So as long as we keep moving forward and we're not dismayed by the lack of movement within some of these big companies and within government especially, I think it's going to work. One of the reasons we're focusing on sort of a microgrid strategy is in order to prepare ourselves should big government not be supportive of this move. What that allows us to do is allows us to exercise create innovation on First Nation territory, which is outside of provincial jurisdiction. So at the moment, anything outside of, so just the cannabis is a great example. So the cannabis industry is regulated by the province in Canada. And so when First Nation businesses want to innovate in that space, they normally it would be almost impossible for them to do so. So what they do is they do that on First Nation land. and are very quick to show two fingers to the province and say, well, you have no jurisdiction here, so we're going to do whatever creative stuff we need to do. So that's where partnership with First Nations is critical as well, because they have a different jurisdictional set of authority, and that applies, I know, in the States as well. And so for me, this is an opportunity on innovation that you can really focus on working closely with tribes, where your provincial or federal jurisdiction doesn't support what you're doing. Focus on working with tribes where you do have that jurisdictional ability.
How can we recruit an Elon Musk of fuel cells? And might Randy McEwen be a candidate for that?
I'm not sure if we need an Elon Musk. I think we've got a groundswell. You know, you may need a sacrificial lamb unto slaughter, someone who has access to finance, is able to explore those projects. You know, I think Elon Musk had finance, so he could just do what he needed to do. And he invested a bunch of his own money. So for me, it's sort of trying to find someone who has that level of resources willing to give it a go. And you need a government who's going to support that. We've got support from the Premier in BC, significant support. But when he goes down to his ministers, everything dies a death very quickly.
That's good.
Trevor Milton might be a candidate.
Fortunately, we have elections next year.
Yeah.
There's also still some technical challenges, right? So as Holger has shown, the technology is really at technology readiness level 8, and that's true for some lower power multiple unit sort of trains. But there's a big difference between technology readiness level and commercial readiness level. That's one of the things that really the Class 1s would want to see for sure. And to get there, we need demonstrators, prototypes. We need to show that this is actually possible. There are lots of operational constraints as well. So usually a railway, we run trains to make money with those trains or transport people. We are not an R&D lab, okay? Momo would love to have zero emission trains. So does Carrie, and so does Lynn. You can't just ring up a supplier and say, hey, I want them right now. Can you deliver them within a year's time frame? They're not commercially available yet. We are still in that phase. Clearly, the move is towards getting them all commercially available for different applications. And mainline long distance freight is probably not the best place to start, as it's actually fairly difficult to do. But the short lines are much better, and passenger agencies are significantly better to start with, because you can actually do that. And the Alstom project does demonstrate that. But you need a rugged train. It needs to actually work. And even in Germany, we had the 2 Alstom trains right now that just completed testing. Another example in the US would be Florida East Coast with their natural gas trains, right? They have been operating now for many years. They're still not fully commissioned. They're in in-service demonstration phases, also for safety regulations. We need something similar for hydrogen-powered trains as well. That has to happen. And that has to be funded. And unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have somebody like an Elon Musk that says, oh yeah, cost it what it may, I don't really care. We're just going to do it. Most state governments don't have that sort of money either, right? They can start and they can help, but we do need these demonstrators. We need to get it also rugged, because the railway environment is harsh. So without show me how it actually works, does it actually work? It's not going to happen. And the Class 1s are definitely not going to accept that. Now, some of them might be willing to part and say, okay, let's try this. Let's try it within our sort of industry, within our sort of environment. And they may even be willing to donate equipment and some manpower, but typically they're not willing to fund it out of cash flow, especially not right now.
Well, Elon Musk didn't accomplish what he did for batteries because he was rich. He did it because he had a vision that he could get the media to lock onto, and that's what we need, is someone who can speak for the hydrogen transition with the same commitment that Musk did for his battery vision.
But Stan, the point we're making is that even if we had that, the industry as a whole lacks the capital right now to move this forward. And until we clear that hurdle of getting the capital, all the media attention in the world, while certainly important, isn't going to amount to Hydrail trains. I mean, talk is cheap. People are going to, cheer at the end of the day when they actually see clean, green, environmentally friendly trains. And that's what we're talking about is, how do we overcome this monumental initial hurdle of, getting the capital and the resources to make it happen.
People, people that buy the stock are the ones who make that determination. And if they've never heard of it, they're not going to buy the stock.
Ask the energy people. That's what in Germany drives the discussion. The energy people are the ones who want the hydrogen because they have to get rid of the surplus energy.
That's good.
For them, hydrogen is the business case. They just need somebody who's buying it.
So in Canada, that would be Alberta getting involved big time, right? To help the oil industry transition. Demonstration projects, I think we're going to have some on the West Coast pretty quick and some on the East Coast pretty quick. We're going to have one in Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada. Folks, it's 1:45, and I don't want to stop discussion on this topic. I just want to put a plug in for next year's conference that I want people to think about format, because I've been hearing rumblings that we will not be back to 100% normalcy in international travel by next June, which is hard to believe for a guy like me, but this is what I've been hearing. So I think we're going to have some form of hybrid, in person if you can and feel safe, and also Zoom for the rest that don't arrive. Because for years I've been thinking we should have some sort of hybrid online as well anyways, but I think Zoom's given us a demonstration, just like we've been talking about, a transition platform to have at next year's conference. And what do you folks, got to be gender neutral here, inclusive, think of a hybrid in-person but also Zoom capable or some Zoom-like platform for a conference? And Shannon, I don't know, you're nodding your head, you're muted, but you're the communication expert. Others, what are you all thinking about that?
I agree.
Oh, go ahead.
Stan, you agree?
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely agree with that as well. It should be the option of either in-person attendance or virtual Zoom platform attendance.
I agree well on board. I think it would be sad to think that, but we may not be allowed to travel because of a budget crunch that we are in because of COVID. And so even if we are clear to travel, we may not be able to travel as far as funding wise. So I think the online platform will be really helpful for us to participate and also contribute.
This is Mark at CHFCA. I completely agree. We actually have 2 conferences coming up. We are still scheduled to have our September 9 and 10 conference, but we are going to be doing that and using that as an experiment on the hybrid approach. So we are going to have small groups in person who will be connected. They will have to stay separate, and then we will have them connected virtually. And we'll also have outside players, and we're getting the software in place. There's software available to help us with that. We're also going to include in that a virtual trade show, so that we will have people online that you can go and see basically their products and look at their quote, booth online, and then also have somebody you can talk to there to ask about it. So we're really trying to make it a location where you can have, actually do business, because our goal is this is something where people want to make business relationships, sell products, and develop partnerships. And while webinars are great for exchanging information, to get business done, you need to have somewhere where people can meet and go to those sort of equivalent of the hallway conversations. So we're going to be starting that in September. We're going to be following up in June. We have the World Hydrogen Technology Conference taking place in Montreal in June, which we're going to do concurrently with ours. And that, again, we're seeing, just like you're saying, it's going to have to be, even then, a hybrid type approach to be able to be effective. And I think it also opens up all sorts of opportunities, everything from sponsorship opportunities to different ways of connecting. So yeah, encourage you to look at it.
Well, we'll be eager to hear back from you, Mark, on how it worked out for you and what you discovered, because those lessons learned are where I live. I need to understand so we can refine and improve what we deliver as well. So please.
Well, I encourage you to participate. I encourage you to join our
So you're saying that's September. So maybe if you don't mind in the public chat, just typing in a website or details so we can plug into that, that would be awesome.
Okay.
And Mark, I can post that, promote your event on our International Hydrail Conference website.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Shannon.
So most of the folks that I've heard from have recommended this format in advance. And so I think that it's a really great opportunity to reduce a lot of barriers. Like Momoko was saying, there could be some financial restrictions or barriers for people participating around the world. So thanks everyone for the great feedback. I think it's a way to show leadership and environmental sustainability and responsibility.
Yeah, that virtual trade show, that or whatever, vendor booth or whatever, Mark, that's intriguing. I wonder how that would even work. It kind of like, how you have a house for sale and you can take a virtual tour of the house. Maybe that's the way it works. I don't know, but
well, we're gonna push the responsibility onto the suppliers to develop their own virtual. And they can they can have videos in there, they can have information, they can have a virtual tour, whatever they feel is the appropriate thing to have in their quote booth. And then you visit that, you can chat and so on. We'll see how it works, but lots of opportunities for creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just posted both our website and also the hydrogenfuelcellconference.com website that you can go to.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And Addy from CUTRIC, if you're still on, if you can post, because you've got something coming up here that's going to be virtual. Yeah, you are still on. I see you there. You might want to just post the CUTRIC. I think it's just CUTRIC.ca. But if there's anything about the conference you've got coming up, that'd be great. So, folks, this has been fantastic. Wow. I like Stan says, I'm blown away and I'm just really excited. The momentum continues. Lots more discussion that needs to continue and promote and it's coming, Stan. Come on. We've all had what's it going to take, questions from Mark and everybody else, but actually it's happened. We've seen it. Now it's just how do we make it the norm, right? As opposed to, oh, wow, it's innovative. Let's make it like, oh, tell me something I don't know, what's new? That's the next generation of this whole thing, folks, with Hydrail. And getting the whole transition to clean and zero emission industry, transportation and housing, a whole new workforce. That's my bailiwick right now, with engineers at least, and solving other emerging challenges related to all the infrastructure to this. This has been a real exciting morning for me, but I don't want to limit discussion. We've actually got this Zoom site till 1 o'clock. So I just put it out there. I didn't know where we were going to go with this. I thought, oh man, the worst thing that could happen is it ends at 10 in the morning. But I mean, we're like bang on time here. So anything else people want to talk about besides next year's meeting, that is, jump in. Like if there's anything else, and leave if you got it. Like we're peaked at 40, I think. We're down to 28. We're still holding strong here. And I just want to thank everybody, the whole organizer, Shannon, Jonathan, Andreas, Stan, everybody, the moderators, Holger, thank you so much. This has been awesome. And I guess I just feel bad because we had to pick a time to hold this during my day, and I hosting it, of course I'm picking like a time where I'm awake, but there was a Dr. Ogawa from Japan, Stan, you know this, who was going to participate if we'd had it in person. Well, he's going to see the recorded version. I don't know that he did make it to sign on because it's about 3 or 4 in the morning his time. But we've got to, we'll continue to refine our delivery methods, and recording it is the big plus. And this is not going to be a wasted recording as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to use it in my course, bite-sized pieces of it, mind you. but for my students to train the next generation of Hydrail engineers. So really, really exciting for me. That's kind of my closing remark. If anybody else has anything they want to jump in and say, please jump in.
Just one idea, and I don't know how we would make the approach, but Burlington Northern Santa Fe built a Hydrail switch engine that worked just very nicely. If we could get them to visibly be a part of this and say, look what we did, and sort of come out of the closet and say that, and take some pride and some ownership in having demonstrated the feasibility of this, it would be great. I mean, they're visible. Is anybody have any ideas how that might be done? When I tried it, they were still committed to natural gas. And I think the carbon train has left the station now, and they probably understand that. So if we could get them to put their HH1205 as look what we did, that would be wonderful.
I can say something to that. The person to speak to at BNSF would be Michael Cleveland. I know they're currently focusing on their battery locomotive that will be part of a hybrid consist in California. They have at the moment terminated their Hydrail efforts, but hopefully that's going to change in the future again. Yeah.
This is Matthew. The fellow that was running that project for BNSF is now working with us, Tom Lambert. So we have some pretty good information about how that project went. My understanding was that ultimately that came to an end. The fuel cells got contaminated, and then the cost to get that cleaned up was prohibitive. But overall, it sounded like it was a pretty successful project, joint with the U.S. Army.
Right, and
I think the project just ran out of time, and it was 10 years ago. And but by the time they got the specifications set up the way they should be, they were pretty much out of money.
And honestly, as ironic and counterintuitive as it sounds, I don't know that turning to the Class 1 freight railroads is going to be tremendous value added at this point. And I know it seems like by every measure it should be, but, and Andreas was alluding to this a few minutes ago, this industry has for decades operated under the MO that the freight railroads develop new technology and it trickles down to passenger rail. And I think we've got to divest ourselves of that mindset that this technology we're working on right now, first of all, is going to be something that is far, far more beneficial for intercity passenger rail, commuter rail, switchers, short line freight. I don't know that this really has a home long-term in long haul freight or really even long haul passenger rail. I just don't think it's conducive to that. So I really think we need to focus on those particular aspects of rail operations on a macroscopic scale. And then if the freight railroads see opportunities to follow, they will do so on their own volition. I can assure you that. But this is going to find its home both from a usability standpoint and from a development standpoint in the passenger and short line freight rail, and that's where we need to be paying the most attention.
My suggestion was not that they start doing anything about it, but simply that they acknowledge their successful authorship of it 10 years ago. France is committed to having all its freight Hydrail in 15 years. And surely there might be a national pride of ownership that could be leveraged off of that.
Okay, well, let me jump in here because actually, Stan, you're correct, and I agree with Lynn. I think the Grace Quans and Hydrogen Emotions of the world are going to be the bridge that ties you two together, because it's all about range with freight, and in North America anyways. In France, I think the runs are shorter, but I could be wrong on that. Andreas can jump in and correct me, but with lower pressure storage, you're going to increase your range, 7 to 14 fold, and then the economics jump in. We'll see. And Lynn, you're right. Probably the earliest will be yard switchers, which are short trips and light loads, and passengers, same idea. But Holger's leading the way with that. Short trips, well, I don't know. Is short trips Holger? It is kind of, isn't it? Regional passenger and train trams, and China's leading it. And that's the one regret I have of this whole thing. China's, 15 hours ahead of us, and they got more Ballard fuel cells than we'll ever have in Canada by the sound of it, I don't know. And they've got tram trains running on these things. So Hydrail, and so next year's conference, whoever's got contacts with China, so Daljit, I think you said you do, obviously. If you can get several of them to show up, or at least present, or pre-record, if it's in the middle of the night for them, I really want to hear what's going on with China. And we need to hear from around the world, because again, it's just another demonstration of it's out there, guys, and the economics are going to get there eventually. The politics, they're going to get there. Every part of the system is going to get there. And
China sent 3 people to Hamburg.
I didn't hear you. Sorry, Stan.
China sent 3 people to Hamburg last year.
Yes, that's right. I remember that. So there you go.
And China's Hydrail pioneer spoke in Toronto at the same time that the hydrogenics and Alstom commencement began.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I'd like to add, Gordon. I think just building on that, our member companies do an awful lot of business in China, selling products and services over there, and it's it's driven by the regulatory and the support that is in the China market for that. What I heard here, and I think Jonathan raised a very good point about disruptive companies coming in. I think there's other comments about large companies will come in if they see the business opportunity there. Cummins is starting to come in. So I think there's the products will be there, and there's going to be huge business opportunities. Perhaps an Elon Musk will arise. But stepping back and looking at it, what's going to sort of motivate those people to do that, to start coming in? It obviously starts with people being aware of this, and with the hydrogen supply being there and recognized as essential. And this is not just for Hydrail. This applies to buses, marine, aviation, blending it into pipelines. Every area, those 2 key things are needed. High level support and recognition that hydrogen is essential, and that we're going to need to start moving that direction. That has to come from political leaders and from industry leaders to say that, so that people start going, oh, well, what's the business opportunity? Can I start up a company to do something here? And the other part of it is recognizing that hydrogen, it's not just needed for Hydrail, it's needed for all the buses, it's needed for all the other applications too. How do we start getting a recognition that hydrogen is going to be like a utility? It's going to be like our power grid. It needs to be clean, it needs to be reliable, it needs to be low cost. And how do we start putting those plans in place to supply all the needs? I think those are the challenges. You can show that there's going to be hydrogen, and you can show that there's that hydrogen is in our future. I think you'll start seeing people start getting businesses underway.
Yep, agreed.
And I think those are things that we can get involved in. Everybody here can start working on those type of things in parallel with their work on rail. They can start working on those type of communications. And the other things I think that, the regulatory training, codes and standards things, those are also perhaps things that can be worked on more collectively as well, because they'll have to be moved forward. So I would encourage the group here to look for those business opportunities, but also look to see how we can advance hydrogen more broadly, advance awareness at the public level, and maybe move forward on the codes and standards and training.
I strongly agree with that. And one thing that we could ride on is the fact that the trucking industry is rapidly converting without any external pushing. They're going at, they see the handwriting on the wall. And Nicola has rolled out their thing, and the South Korean truck is extraordinary, and that is happening without any effort on our part, and we need to simply to harmonize with it.
Well, I would say it's not happening without any effort. There's a huge number of people doing exactly the same thing, looking for opportunities, how to retrofit, there's testing, there's codes and standards, there's training, there's the whole hydrogen infrastructure. So every single sector you look at, there's huge amounts of work that have to happen to move them forward. But the alignment ones are in the, the crossovers in the hydrogen supply and in the general recognition that hydrogen is necessary to get us to net zero.
In the area of freight, the intermodality between trucking and rail is a means for us to work together. And the third complement of that is the ports, where all three come together. So that is a story that Bill Thunberg has particularly been interested in getting out, and I agree with him on it. So I put that to you just as something to think about as a useful construct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, folks. How are we doing? It's 12:06 or 8:06 or whatever, 3:06, wherever we are in the world. You know what that is, I don't tell you, but we're past our time. And like I said, if I'm going to leave this site open. It'll shut off at 1 o'clock automatically. I'm just checking to see. I don't know that we've got people in breakout rooms, but we might. If there's anybody chatting or anything like that, I don't know if we ever got people into breakout rooms. I'm clearly still looking at this whole Zoom thing. But folks, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you so much for joining. It's amazing. And I see on the chat, my student Cassidy Murrell asked a student question, any advice? And he's got more than enough. So thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Holger. Holger's already signed off. I don't know if Carrie's still on for those great advice. Oh, you're still there, Holger. Yeah. And so, folks, until we meet again, whatever it is, virtually or otherwise, it's just been a pleasure. And Shannon, come on, I got to leave the last word to you. You've kind of set this whole thing up and connected us. Why don't you close us off?
Not sure that I'm prepared for closing off, but I'm just really pleased to see everybody. There was such widespread disappointment when our committee had to make the difficult decision to cancel the in-person conference. We were looking forward to it so much. A lot of hard work and planning went into that. So invite and welcome your feedback so that we can plan a really great conference next year and welcome you all here. Yeah, I'm really looking to feedback on high value sessions and seminars, whether they're virtual or whether they're in person. So any feedback you have on that, please reach out to me anytime. We'll be preparing our sponsorship packages to be sending out much earlier this time around than last time. So that's in the works already in terms of the thinking around that. So if you know of any sponsors or if your organization is in a position to sponsor, please reach out to our planning committee and let me know. And I think that's about it from my end, Gord. Just really happy to see everybody and look forward to our next full-scale conference where we all come together and welcome whoever wants to join virtually.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Everybody's waving. Yeah, you're more than welcome. This is great. Thanks, Shannon.
I hope you have seen Otto.
Well, you know, Holger and Uta, they want to come back, and he wants to do guest lectures at UBC. So you're all welcome to come and do a guest lecture, by the way. That just goes without saying. Like, Kelowna is a little bit out of the way for, you know, Vancouver, Toronto, New York, California, you know, LA. We don't get many famous people up here But when you guys all come up to the conference, although it's going to be June, I won't be teaching my course then. We may just put you in front of a camera and sit you down for a little bit to give some pearls of wisdom for our students, because we need all the help we can get. We're going to get the next generation going.
There are some very exciting, fun things planned at the conference. Like there's a murder mystery dinner on the old steam train that we were planning, and so that's something that we're going to keep on the schedule for next year.
All right. Well, we're down to 18. I think we're below critical mass. Carrie, thank you.
Appreciate being included.
All right. Take care. All right, everybody. All the best. I'm gonna shut it down. That's it. I'm making the executive decision. We're having way too much fun here. Now it's just the organizing committee. All right. Bless you all. Be safe.
Thanks, Gord. Good to see you.
All right. Take care. See you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Grace.